All right, we're good.
Mhm.
All right, we call for the committee of whole at 5:31. First up, to go to the order, any council members have anything? I have a couple things, but I'll save it for my order for it. Review of regular meeting agenda. Anything on consent mostly that anyone had concerns about that would lead us to line for it or? All right, so that will move to our first item, which is introduction. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You want it?
Oh, yes, sorry. So for honor, was that emailed to everyone, by the way, that you said? Okay, apologies. We are not having our presentation on the municipal financial plan tonight. That's getting moved to next meeting, which is December 3rd. So that's gonna be pulled from the committee of the whole agenda tonight. So no number 2 on the committee of the whole agenda tonight. I believe there was an illness and they just needed to reschedule. Yeah. So they just need a little more time. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to our first item, which is the introduction and swearing in of Officer Tyler Lesnick, and I'll turn that over to Lieutenant Safran.
Good evening, everybody. We're really excited to swear in Tyler tonight. I just wanted to give you a quick update before I do that, and we need to get that done. Chief Keller introduced Officer Gilling and Milam to you guys back in August. I'm excited to share Officer Milam has completed his FTO as of yesterday, so he's doing great. Officer Gilling is a couple weeks out, but he's doing well as well, and everything's going really good with the training. So we're excited to get them out there on solo patrol. Our student officer Natalie, who's in the academy right now, he's scheduled to graduate on December 30th. He's also doing very well. I talked to him last night. We're really excited to welcome him back and get him going with the Dutch process. All that's going really, really well. We currently have several candidates in the early stages of background to fill our remaining vacancy. We're working really hard to find the right fit. So we have several people. I interviewed one today. Kind of ongoing, but it's going really well. So that's kind of the update on that. Now I'd like to welcome Tyler up. We're extremely excited to have Tyler as part of our team. Tyler is originally from Illinois and moved to Redmond when he was 5 years old. While living in Illinois, Tyler's uncle lived nearby, who was a police officer. Tyler remembers his stories and letting him sit in his patrol car, play with the lights and sirens. This is when Tyler decided he was going to be a police officer. Tyler's family eventually moved to Sammamish, where he attended elementary, middle, and high school. He graduated from Skyline High School in 2019 and joined the Police Explorer program, where he remained active until he was 21. He became a civilian advisor. Tyler began attending Washington State University in 2019, where he joined the WSU Police Cadet program and studied criminal justice, criminology, and at-risk. Tyler graduated from WSU in 2022. Tyler comes to us from the King County Sheriff's Office, where he was hired in 2023 and completed the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. Tyler enjoys boating, hiking, shooting, and time with his friends and family. We're excited to welcome Tyler to the team and look forward to his service for many years to come. So with that, Mayor.
So let's think if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Tyler M. Lesnick,
I, Tyler M. Lesnick,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
perform the duties of police officer
perform the duties of a police officer
for the city of Duval
for the city of Duval
as prescribed by law
as prescribed by law
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
that I will support and maintain
and I will support and maintain
the Duval Police Department's vision, mission,
the Duval Police Department mission, vision,
core values,
core values,
and the police officer's code of ethics.
and the police officer's code of ethics.
The state of, uphold the Constitution and laws
Uphold the state's constitution and laws
of the United States of America,
the United States of America,
the state of Washington,
the state of Washington,
and the ordinances of the city of Duval, so help me God.
and the ordinance of the city of Duval, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So this is my mom, Christine Lesnick. She's a chief, or she's an executive assistant for Teamster. My sister over here is Sammy Lesnick. She's a behavioral health technician at one of the schools nearby. And then Paul Bocci back there, who's one of my partners at King County and is one of the best.
Congratulations. Welcome to Duval.
Thank you very much.
I snapped a couple during, but did you get some?
I get the whole video.
Oh, okay, no, let's grab some pictures, okay. There's a few formal picture. At the same time.
I'll see you in a second.
Liam Hurwitz.
Liam Hurwitz.
Ready? One more. There.
Thank you.
Congratulations. We did that? Yep. All right, so congratulations again and welcome to Duval. All right, so we're skipping number 2. Then we'll move on with information on the 2025 WCIA liability assessment. With that, I'll turn it over to, am I turning this over to you, Sophia, or should I?
Sure,
Okay.
I'm happy to introduce Robert Roscoe, he's the deputy director for the Washington City's Insurance Authority. And we'll have you go to the podium, and I believe you sent over a presentation.
I did. You
Okay,
guys have it?
yep, and we will share it on the screen.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Robert Roscoe. I'm the Deputy Director at Washington City's Insurance Authority, or as we like to say, WCIA. It's not exciting when I tell people it's actually insurance and not the Washington Central Intelligence. And it makes people at parties once they find out I'm in insurance. But it's what I do. I've been involved with WCIA now for 24 years. I worked there for 5 years. I left and actually I went to go work for a municipality. So while I was at a municipality, I was actually a member of WCIA. So I had the unique experience of working for WCIA and then being a member of WCIA. And then I came back to WCIA in 2018. So I've been back for a little over 6 years as the deputy director. And for those of you who do not know, WCIA, we are an interlocal government agency. So we provide a private function. We provide insurance, property and liability, but we're not an insurance company. We are a risk pool. We were created back in 1981 primarily because unfortunately, government agencies are not a very good insurance risk. Let's be honest, you're not. Unfortunately, the private insurance sector could not make money off of government agencies. So there was a really difficult time where governments were struggling to find coverage. So they decided to create their own insurance company. And that's what they did back in 1981. We started out with 9 municipal agencies. We've since grown to over 165. Well, right now we're at 168. And honestly, I've been getting calls daily for new members because, as I'll explain here shortly, it's a very difficult insurance market right now. It's just a difficult time. But again, we're throughout the state of Washington. We only insure municipal agencies. We do not insure any county or state agencies, and we only insure municipalities, or you provide a municipal function like 911 dispatch centers, sewer, water districts, fire authorities, you have to perform somewhat of a municipal function or be a municipality in order to be eligible to be in WCA.
We got too many screens here.
Slides. Some of the advantages though, of being a member of WCA, we're run by a board of directors. And every member of WCA has what we call a delegate. So they get to go to our full board meetings, they get to decide on different coverages, whether or not we expand or contract the coverages that we provide to our members. For instance, last year we expanded our coverage document to include crisis responders. In particular, because we have medical malpractice exclusion, it doesn't apply to EMTs for fire, but we were concerned that a lot of agencies are now hiring crisis responders to deal with individuals that are dealing with mental health issues. Rather than calling out the police for every call out, they're now responding and providing some services. We were afraid that if something were to go wrong, they may allege there's malpractice, even though we don't ever think it would arise to that. But we actually changed our coverage document to make sure that that was included rather than excluded, so that our members wouldn't have that exposure. So that's some of the benefits. Plus, we really kind of specialize. We're good at saying don't do things, but we also understand that's not practical. So our job is to try to educate and teach our members, if you are going to do things, here's some best practices. Here's some things that we find will help reduce your exposure in the event that something were to go wrong. And hopefully, if it does, you're not going to then be sued as a result of it. So we're hopefully trying to teach our members through risk management, training, and we also have claim handling. One of the benefits too, being in a risk pool, is we try to have stable rates. It's getting harder to keep rates stable because costs just keep climbing as much as they can. But I'll go over some slides here in a bit just to kind of show you how tumultuous the market's been. But in a risk pool, we want to keep rates as stable as we possibly can, so you don't have the huge fluctuations that you'd be more prone to in the insurance market. Also, probably one of the biggest advantages are coverage decisions are made by our executive director. And it's one thing, and I'll be honest with you, I've worked for an insurance company in the past. And when there's a large loss, the first thing an insurance company is going to do is look to that contract and look at that policy and see whether or not there's exclusions. And whereas WCA, we have a coverage document, we do have to be shared responsibilities to all our members, but we're not looking for ways to find exclusions for our members. Rather, we're looking to find ways to cover our members. We exist and we are run by our members, and we are there for our members in the event you do have those losses. So we're very proud of that fact that rather than look for exclusions, we look for inclusions to make sure that we are covering our members to the best of our ability. Now, that doesn't mean we can't cover something that's clearly excluded, because that's a responsibility that we have to the entire membership. Like I said, everyone's losses impact everyone else's rates. So that's kind of the decisions as to when we're in the pool. And we do, just so you know, we provide $20 million in liability coverage for you. That's your auto, your general employment practices, errors and omissions, police, anything that the city does that could arise to what's called a tort. We're there to cover you in the event of claim or a lawsuit's filed against you. Some additional insurance also, we have property, boiler or equipment breakdown, crime and fidelity, cyber and pollution. Bulk of our coverage those with liability. Once you're in our liability program, you get the cyber and pollution as an add-on as part of that coverage. Most of our members have property. We also insure property. That's your stuff. So unfortunately, if there were to be a fire at City Hall or down, that's where we would then replace that building. Kind of funny. Well, it's not funny. It's actually hard. But in 2018, when I first started back at WCA, weekend on my job, we had a complete fire out at one of our members. It was an old armory with 20-inch concrete walls. You think that would not burn it? Right to the total ground. It was an old senior center, and there was a fire in the HVAC center, and it was or in the HVAC service area. was on the schedule for $6.5 million, turned into a $23 million loss. But the nice thing is, we paid for that. We were there for a member in the eventuality of a loss like that. That's why you have coverage with WCA, is for those unplanned, unforeseen circumstances. So even though, what we say property, we cover the replacement of the property, not just what it's scheduled for. And that was a huge difference. And that was a big problem with my policy, because I have reinsurance that I have to purchase. And they weren't real happy with me because they assessed me a rate off of scheduled values. And that value on the schedule was $6.5 million, but it was a $23 million loss. But the nice thing was, we're not gonna say, sorry, city, you're only getting $6 million. You actually, they ended up getting $23 million to replace that bill. In-house, we have our own in-house claims, very experienced. This is all we do, is municipal claims. So we've seen it. I've been involved with WCA for 24 years. There's not too many claims I'm unfamiliar with, unfortunately. If it could happen here, it could happen to other members as well. So we've seen a lot of issues that have been dealt with on a government sector. But that's where our experience comes into play. We're very good, and our motto is we like to pay what we owe. You know what, sometimes things don't go right, and we have a responsibility to make sure that people are getting treated fairly and quickly. And that's where I think our claims staff really excels. And we also talk to city staff as well. We don't operate in a vacuum. So when we have these issues, and that's partly why we were created, was to work with our members. So when we're discussing these issues, we're going to talk to city staff. We're going to say, what's your take? What's your input? What do you think happened? Is there some issues here that we need to resolve? So we're not just operating just arbitrarily without consensus of the city. Sometimes we do have that claim authority and we have to make those hard decisions, but that's where experience comes into play. We also have in-house risk management. Every member is assigned a risk management representative. So when you have a parks department and they're thinking, hey, let's go shoot pumpkins across the field and have people catch them, they can call us up and say whether or not that's a good idea. And we can say, no, it's probably not a good idea, especially if you're involving children. Because again, even with a waiver, you're not going to get out of any sort of damage if that pumpkin were to hit that individual and cause some subsequent injuries as a result of that. Now, if you do want to do that, and you have your mindset on it, and you're dead set, well, then we will help you with some waivers and some hold harmless agreements and try to talk you out of it. But we don't tell you how to run your city. That's the mayor, that's the city administrator's job. You know, you have your job to do, we have our job to do, which is to be there in the event of a loss, unfortunately. But again, we'll advise and we'll educate and we'll try to train, but we don't dictate, we don't tell you how to run your city. But we do provide a lot of training, both on-site and off-site. We do a lot of seminars. We do now. Part of the benefit of working remotely with COVID was the advent of the Teams and the Zoom and the trainings now, where typically we had everything on site and members had to travel. Now we're doing a lot more remotely and we're able to touch a lot more people with those trainings. So that's one of the benefits we saw out of that. But we look at public entity exposure such as personnel. We do a lot of harassment, anti-harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment trainings, as well as land use issues going on with whether or not your codes are up to date, what you need to do to make sure that you're processing things appropriately. Police, huge exposure, obviously, as you can attest to just having a police department. You can do that's probably one of the most frustrating parts of my job. You can do everything right. You still have a claim filed against you. There's no barrier to an individual feeling that they've been harmed or alleged to have been damaged by a city service. Whether or not you're ultimately responsible is going to be depending upon the facts and review of those circumstances. That's where our claim staff will come into play and review those. And again, if we don't think there's been anything done or anything inappropriate being done, we're not afraid to fight a good fight. It's getting harder and harder though, and I'll go over some of those reasons as to why it is, especially if a claim turns into a lawsuit and then survives what's called a summary judgment motion, where it then has to proceed to a jury, where a jury has to decide whether or not there's ultimately liability of damages, because that can be really a whose attorney is a better attorney at making an argument. And unfortunately, who has the better story? It's usually someone that's been harmed or hurt, rather than us saying it wasn't our fault. So I'll go over what really makes it difficult for us in our state in particular. But we also provide some grants to our members through risk management programs, and that's set up, we do a lot of committees. And we have a risk management committee where other members come onto the committee and they're reviewing these grant applications. So it's not just WCA deciding who's gonna get the money, it's actually the members deciding where the money should be allocated. So that's kind of the nice part, it's really a member-driven, member-run organization. Give you a little update. WCA, we provide $20 million in liability coverage. We fund the first $4 million of that with our own money. And then I have to purchase what's called reinsurance above that. And there's multiple carriers that I use. One's a government entity, it's a pool of pools. And then we attach to traditional insurance right now, at the 10 million mark. And I have two carriers, one from 10 to 15, and then another between 15 and 20 million. And the insurance is a very cyclical industry. It's prone to a lot of big swings from year to year. And some of the things that impact that are investment returns, whether bonds in particular. I don't know how your investments have been in bonds, but the last few years ours have been horrible. Now we don't buy and sell, we buy and hold, but on paper we had over a $20 million loss. It was a year last year in the financials. Yeah, this year was much better, but things like that are really impacting the pricing of insurance companies, because insurance companies take your money and then they invest that money in their own investments. And when stock markets go up, that's great for them, but when bonds and things like that go down, well, that hurts things. Also, catastrophic losses. Global warming has definitely taken a toll with wildfires. Whole towns and cities have been burnt down. We had one in Washington, over in Eastern Washington, a couple of years back. Luckily, it was not a member of our pool, so we did not have to pay out on that. But I remember last year we had to evacuate, the city of Cheney had to evacuate from Spokane fires. My son was over there. Luckily, we didn't lose any structures or any buildings, but it's threats like that that are just driving the markets, really putting a big strain on things. And when you have what's called a hard market, underwriting is very restrictive. They start looking for ways to raise rates for any reason. They reduce their amount that they're willing to give carriers. So whereas I have a carrier saying, look, we'll give you $8 million in reinsurance. Now they're only going to give me $4 million in insurance because they're reducing their exposure accordingly. And while they do that, they're also increasing their premiums. So they restrict my coverage and charge me more for that coverage. So that's very difficult to handle. Now, sometimes you'll get a soft market where it can go the other way. Actually, property the last 6 years have been really hard. And it's taken a toll on rates. And I've tried to keep them as low as possible because I know we've been getting hit both on property and liability, unfortunately, in our state. And we kept our property low artificially. We kept our property rates artificially low for the last 5 years, but it did have to cause a big increase this year. The good news on property, I just got back. We had to buy our coverages, and I'm getting notification that we're actually going to get a rate decrease, and that's huge. I haven't seen a rate decrease since I've been back at WCA for 6 years. So hopefully that will be passed on to our members then in a year or two when we set our rates for our property. There is a little bit of a lag, unfortunately, because I just purchased my coverage for next year. So then you'll see that benefit in 2026, barring any adverse claim developments. Also, social justice reform, you've seen that on the news. I mean, there's just been a big push about that. And what really makes our state difficult is we have what's called joint and several liability. If you're not familiar with that term, you really need to be, because that drives a lot of carriers away from Washington State. We're about one of 5 states in the nation that still have joint and several liability. And what that means is you have 2 or more people at fault for an accident or an injury. And you have a fault-free individual that was harmed. Claimant is fault-free. Let's say, for instance, you have a passenger in a car. They didn't do anything wrong. There's just a passenger in the car goes off the road, and they now claim that you had a poorly designed road. Now, the driver could have been drunk. But the passenger did nothing wrong, even getting into a vehicle with a drunk driver, we made that argument before we lost. So they're fault free, just to give you that exposure. Now, if they find fault between the driver, and let's say the city's 1% at fault. And then they award because this individual died or has catastrophic injuries, paraplegic, quadriplegic, $10 million. But they say, city, you're only 1% at fault from the jury perspective, it doesn't matter. They can collect the entire judgment from any at fault party. So just by being 1% at fault, we have to pay that $10 million. Now, we can though then go and try and collect from the driver who's 99% at fault. But do you think we're gonna collect anything from them? No, they don't usually have any assets or anything worthwhile for us then to recover that $10 million verdict that we now have to fund and pay for. So for us, it's a very unfair way of allocating costs, and it's called big pocket liability. They're looking for who's the deep pocket. Well, unfortunately, the government is. And that to us is just an unfair way of allocating this. Now, the rationale behind that is the state legislature says, well, we don't want those that have been harmed to have to suffer. They should be able to collect from anyone at fault, regardless of what percentage they're at fault for. And we can't argue to a jury when they're deliberating that fact, because that's prejudicial to them. So if we say, look, if you find the city even 1% at fault, they're gonna be paying that entire verdict. Can't do it. So again, those are things that then the jury finds out afterwards and said, well, we never would have done it. Well, too late. Now it's already happening. So those are things that we're constantly battling and struggling. Coupled with the fact that we have no tort caps. A lot of states will put caps in place to say the most you can collect is 5 times the economic damages being claimed, or 10 times the amount of pain and suffering being claimed. They'll put a cap in place, up to 2 million or 5 million or 100, whatever the cap is, it's there. Washington, there is no cap. And some of the verdicts are astronomical that I'll talk to you about. And it's very hard then to have to underwrite, because how much premium can you collect when now you're looking at a slip and fall worth $13 million? A slip and fall for this isn't LeBron James that hurt his knee. It's a 65-year-old female jogger who now can collect $13 million from the slip and fall aside. It's that scary. And just to give you some background as to where the markets have been. In 2022, we went out there to buy our reinsurance coverage. One layer, $15 to $20 million. Never had one claim breach that layer. Increased my rate 68%. 2 other reinsurers that were big players in the public entity pulled out of the state of Washington. But no more. Tapped out, saying they were done. So we couldn't even buy anything from them. So that restricted our options as to who we can purchase reinsurance from. And it's really a slim pickings out there. There's like 2 or 3 different carriers willing to still write at high layers. Again, we don't attach to the traditional insurance market until we hit right now $10 million. I'm gonna have to reduce that down because my one carrier, GEM, who's a pool of risk pools, is decreasing our coverage this year. I'm still right now in the middle of renewing and trying to purchase next year's coverage. So I'm in meetings with carriers as often as I can, trying to tell them why they want to be on my program. And all they can say is, yeah, but you're in Washington State, Rob. Sorry. It is that difficult. We're better off than most risk pools because some risk pools attached to the traditional insurance market at $1 million or $2.5 million. We don't attach to a $4 million, or actually, well, gonna be $9 million next year, but this year it was $10 million. So we had a little bit of a buffer, but that's constantly getting eroded. Like I said, this year for 2025, you can see that last bullet point. My reinsurers wanting to increase my self-insured retention. They wanted me to go to $5 million. They told me this last month. Now we have already set our rates to our members where we take on the first $4 million, and then I expect reinsurance to pay anything above that amount. Now they're telling me, sorry, Rob, you have to go to $5 million. I said, but I didn't actuarially account for that exposure. I can't reassess my members. They have budgets they have to set. And we convinced them, because again, they're a pool of pools, to actually lower it down to 4.5 million this year, 4.5 million next year. We just got good news yesterday, or actually, Monday, that was yesterday, yeah, that they're gonna stay at our 4 million layer. So where they threatened to go to 5 million, then they threatened to go to 4.5 million. They said, we'll stay at 4 million, but we're only going to give you, instead of 6 million in limits, we're only gonna give you 5 million. So I have to take them up to 9 million, and then I have to buy another policy above that. So I have to find someone now to fill in between 9 and 10. So we'll see what we can get. Oh, and by the way, while they're doing that, restricting my coverage and lowering my amounts, they're increasing my premiums. So I get to pay more for less. That's the fun part of reinsurance. And what's driving that are what we like to call, it's an industry term. I don't know if I like to call it, but it's nuclear verdicts. Nuclear verdicts are defined by verdicts over $10 million or more. And they usually involve catastrophic life-changing events. Unfortunately, now they're not even involving that. There was a UPS claim out of Yakima federal court. I think it came down 2 weeks ago, $246 million for hostile work environment. For one employee. Now, they reduced it today to $37 million. But that's part of the strategy. 246, the jury awarded $246 million. You can't account for that. That is impossible to insure and underwrite. Now, the judge today reduced it to 37 million, but that's still $37 million. It's not a fatality. It's not a quadriplegic. It's a hostile work environment for an employee. So again, usually what happens is, what you look for are, there's two issues. Did the defendant's conduct actually cause the plaintiff's injury, or is it skilled attorneys who are good at manipulating and convincing jurors through tactics to inflame the verdicts? Plaintiff attorneys are very good at what they do, and unfortunately, they have the argument where someone's been harmed or damaged. And again, how much is a reasonable amount to compensate someone for a catastrophic injury? That's a tough call. And sometimes we have to deal with fatalities. And now you have to put a price tag on that. That is a very difficult thing to do. And I can empathize for any family who has to go through that process. But at the same time, we have to balance budgets and still operate government services. So where's the fine line? Where's the balance on that? And that's where juries come into play and try to have some reasonableness in their deliberations to set that bar. But the bar keeps going up and up each year. And you can see in the nation, there is a study done by the US Chamber of Commerce. You can go online, Google it. It's right there. It's very interesting about this nationwide trend. Washington, we're number 3 in the nation per capita. We're about number 8 or 10 in total cumulative nuclear verdicts, and that's from 2013 to 2022. If they did that study today, I think we'd be much higher, unfortunately. It's last 2 years have been really eye-opening in our state and what's been coming down, especially for public entities. Some of these verdicts have involved healthcare and some sexual abuse allegations, which are very tragic. But at the same time, these costs have a toll. You have to, it's not an unlimited well that they can keep going to get money out to pay for these verdicts and these damages. There's consequences for it. Next slide is our own experience from WCA. We've seen a big proliferation and rising in our own claim experience for our members. Now, a lot of that can be attributed, there was a wrongful death statute that came out in 2019. 2018 was passed and it became effective 2019, and it was retroactive as well. And that really expanded who could sue when you had wrongful death. It used to be you had some economic tie-in, or it was only mom and dad. Now aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters can all claim damages from a wrongful death. And there are consequences to that, unfortunately, because that's gonna cause costs to go up. Coupled with the fact that they're trying to do what's called prejudgment interest. That has been before the state legislature for the past 3 years and it's been voted down. They said they weren't gonna bring it this next session for 2024, no, we're in 2025. Because they think we have a new insurance commission, and they think they're gonna bring it as an agency bill. If they bring it as an agency bill, it's gonna get deference, it's gonna have differential treatment, and it's probably gonna pass. What that means is you collect judgment from the time of the injury, not from the time of a settlement or time of a verdict. That's going to just increase costs and make it harder for us to ever settle claims, because plaintiff attorneys know that the pool is running from the time they're injured, and the longer they wait, the more they can collect on that interest. So they're not gonna have an incentive just to come back and settle that right away. And that's just gonna cost more and more for our members, unfortunately. But you can see that uptick in those claims from our own experience. Next slide. These are just some of the headlines. And I'll kind of go over this, and you don't have to go too far to search for these things. Next slide kind of talks about what we've seen. The state had paid $98 million, 100 after attorney's fees and everything else, $100 million for the wrongful death of a very tragic accident. Susan Powell, if you remember the Powell case, happened down in Carroll. The dad was court-ordered supervision of his children. So the state had to allow him to see the children. He takes the kids from the social worker, locks them inside his trailer, brutally murders them, sets the trailer on fire. Tragic. They found the state liable for that, even though the dad committed a heinous criminal act. Because the court rationale or the jury said, well, we didn't say you had to have home supervision. You could have went to a park to take them there. Well, no one could really foresee the danger that was there at the time, plus he's trying to follow a court order. But we thought $100 million, maybe the state will be a little bit more prompted to listen to our cries for some tort reform and put some reasonableness in maybe joint several liability, because this is a joint several case. Again, the state wasn't 100% liable, but because they had some culpability, they ended up paying the entire verdict of $100 million. But when we talked to the state about it, nope, didn't care. They just made a budget amendment and paid it. So again, unfortunately, they view WCA as an insurance company. Even though we tell them we're a nonprofit interlocal government agency, where members are basically self-insured and we're paying and acting as their third party to adjudicate their claim handling and administer these monies. But they view us as the enemy, that we're an insurance company that we're making money off, and we're not. So we've been pleading to our members, because the legislature will listen to the local governments better than they will us. So if you have a choice or ever have an opportunity to talk to your state or your local representatives, let them know that these have impacts. You know, prejudgment interest is going to increase costs. They just think that it's a unlimited well that they can keep going to, but unfortunately, as you know, it's a pie. You only have so many slices you can divide that up at the end of the day for your budget. And I don't want to raise rates. I don't want to have to charge you more for insurance. We'd like to be less, but unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder. And you can see some of these verdicts. We had Town of Slocum, $15 million for a drowning. And that was a child who jumped in a lake, but unfortunately was unsupervised. But $15 million, what this does, it does have higher costs and impacts to everybody. It's impossible to underwrite. So we have to figure out how much do we how much do we charge to cover these costs. And again, if it happens to you, it can happen to someone else. You have sidewalks, you have roads, you have crosswalks. All those things are huge exposures for our members, and it's hard to calculate from a reinsurance perspective and from an insurance perspective is how much money do we need to collect to pay for these damages when the keeps going higher and higher. Now, just so you know, we do use an actuary to calculate your rates. What they do is they take a look at your losses, they look at the group's losses, and they look at WCA's needs to fund for future claims. And we have some caps in place, so we're trying to keep your rates as stable as possible, but we also know that these have impacts. Because once your neighbors have a large loss, we can only charge them X amount. But again, we're trying to do this all together and keep those rates as stable as possible. And you can see on the slide, my rates have gone up 483% from 2014 to 2024. I used to pay 6 cents per worker hour. Now I'm paying 34 cents per worker hour for reinsurance. That's a huge increase. The next slide, you can see where our members' rates haven't been as steadily an increase. It's 202%. But unfortunately, it's gonna keep going up. So we'd like it to come back down, but we don't see any reasonableness coming into the legislature anytime soon, unfortunately. And the next slide, you can see I have the Duval's late rates where your rates went up overall 84%, where our rates have gone up 207%. So again, we're trying to keep them down as best we can, but it's getting too much pressure from the markets where just because what you do is driving those costs. Like I said, the property market though, that's been good. That's one semblance of good news. Just the liability has been harder and harder. And I kind of give you some slides on the property cost as well, where my rates have gone up over 114%. I had to increase the members' rates last year to make up for that difference. Now, hopefully those will come back down or be a little bit more flat in future years. So what my plea here for members, how do you control your costs? Hire good employees. They're your best asset. Seriously, education, training, we're here to help. We have risk management, we have departments that help your members out when they do programs and they're offering different things to the public. Give us a call, we're happy to help. We have model policies, we talk about pursuit, use of force, dealing with land use, personnel, harassment, discrimination. We have pre-defense programs for our members. So we have the tools to help you guys. If you have exposures or you think could lead to a potential loss, use our services and listen to your city attorney. Please, please, please. I have some councils that won't, and unfortunately they have the claim experience as a result of that. Your city attorney is usually there to help you and try to keep you on the straight and narrow path. There are some state legislative impacts. I kind of talked about that as well. We have a legislative committee that we're trying to make some headway with the state on. But it's been an uphill battle. Our lobbyists basically said, don't even bother, you're banging your head against the wall when we tried to talk about some reforms like on joint and several liability. California is actually more reasonable than Washington State. You can believe that. That's how bad we are as a state. And we're looking at other things we can do to help offset these large increases to our members. We're redoing our Group 5 membership right now because we realized we had some members that were being subsidized. And it's not fair to other members that are good performers. I don't want to lose members. So we're trying to do what we can to help spread those costs more fairly throughout the membership. So with that, any questions for me? I did a lot of talking. Yes.
Yeah, I sent over a question that I was hoping you could get answered. I think it was about a year ago, and I don't know if you ever got it, but for a follow-up in February, and then I asked again just about a week ago, and I don't know if I did it get sent over.
No, I've been out of town for the last month and a half.
Okay, I guess I'll ask. So, I understand how, the rates have gone up, but that's a rate applied to another number, which would be our worker hours.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Worker hours is a big driver.
Yeah. So we have increased our employees from about 40 to over 60.
Mhm.
So that's gonna be a major driver.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
We have more equipment, more property, things like that.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So is there a way that we could understand how much more, if you
Yes.
add another employee, how much more we're paying?
Definitely.
Okay,
Yeah, we have a cost per worker hour. I can share that with Sophia.
okay, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of the.
Definitely,
question
it's
I
same
was
thing
having,
with, same thing with property, as you acquire property, and that's a big thing too, is maintenance. Maintenance. It's one thing to buy something, it's a whole nother thing to know the cost to maintain it in proper working condition. So it doesn't lead to allegations of improper maintenance and go into a deficit mode.
The mayor, and then I'll see if anyone else has questions.
Right, so, on the per cost, I know it's an important thing, but one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation is. Employee lawsuits, which typically, if anything gets to the level of a lawsuit, it means that there has been significant mistreatment of an employee. Or somebody within the jurisdiction. Now, we do know that cities are having a difficult time staffing, and
Especially police.
absolutely, and for example, our city has gone through a recent staffing workload analysis that shows that we are at risk because we don't have enough positions filled. Because we don't have the right positions filled. What is WCIA doing to help cities understand the risk and responsibility to make sure you're properly staffed? One, to reduce risk in particular when it comes to finances and public safety. And also when it comes to having the time and bandwidth to properly manage problem employees and others in order to avoid that significant risk.
We do a lot of training and education over the exposures, like what happens to allegations with public works, with sewer, water utilities, all your different exposures that could be hopefully rectified, or sidewalk maintenance. Sidewalks are a big deal, and having adequate staff to go out there and address those issues. Now, with personnel, lawsuits don't necessarily mean that we're damaged. It could be we're fighting a good fight because we don't think there are damages. And we're not paying on a claim, so we're gonna defend the city in regards to their actions or conduct. But we also have what's called a pre-defense program, where if the city's looking at taking action that could lead to potential litigation or a lawsuit or allegation of a discrimination or wrongful workplace, you can talk to an attorney free of charge, and that's with that. So we don't charge our members for that. And we think it's best to have that defense up front so you can dot your i's, cross your t's, and get your ducks basically lined up in a row. So hopefully you don't get into a claim or a lawsuit.
Yeah, I think what I was referring to more to is, you offer lots of trainings. But more so, what are you doing to make sure that the jurisdictions you insure have that proper level of staffing? Because you can do all the training in the world, and you can do all the pre-defense in the world. But if you don't have the right staffing levels and you don't have people doing the right things, that puts the city in.
Unfortunately, we don't tell you how to run your city because that's the mayor's job and the administration's job and council's job for budget. We don't dictate those terms. Now, what's gonna happen is you're gonna be paying more. The more claims you have, the more you're gonna be paying in assessment. There is a penalty, i.e. we charge a mod factor. It's just like workers' comp do. So if you have additional claims because you're not funding things adequately, your rates are gonna go up accordingly.
Great questions, Councilmember Mercer, and then Lynn.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of the personnel and the property, obviously within the city jurisdiction, there is the owned right away, we have obviously the Washington State Highway that runs down the middle of the city, so you've got sort of state as well as city. I know one thing Public Works has, regularly done is in terms of going after grants to improve sightlines, public safety, lighted crosswalks, various things. Is that also credited back or taken into account when you do or is it sort of part of a more macro?
It's more of a macro. We're not going to charge you for having those things. But if you're getting grants and you're doing good streets, lighting and things like making those improvements, hopefully you don't have the kind of.
More minimizing future
Yes.
exposure than mitigating existing exposure.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nutlin and then Isaacson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there was a slide that compared, our experience rating versus others. Are you on the better side?
Yes.
So
You
we
are
have a-
actually. Yes, you're one of our better performing members. So thank you. Thank you, Chief back or Lieutenant back there as well, because I know you don't have, it's difficult because just by having a police force sometimes, by the nature of what they do, you can get a lot of claims arisen out of improper use of force, arrest, all those things. And also autos. Auto liability is one of our biggest exposures. Just by watching where you go now, I do know I've paid for some cars here recently. It happens, but that's why you have insurance. But, again, it's those driving techniques as well.
Okay, but we're on the lower side.
You are definitely on one of the better end of it. It's still costly, unfortunately, and you can kind of see why in those slides, why we have to charge what we charge, just because the exposure's there.
Councilmember Isaacson?
So very two questions that were back pointing toward the same subject, and that is cost per worker hour. Obviously, the number of workers you have increases your rates. I'm assuming those rates are adjusted for a city like us to be lower because we're a good customer, don't have a lot of claims. But with the advice and counseling that you offer, I think I heard you say you can't sit with us as a mayor or staff and say, you are at higher risk in, let's say, your example, water sewer, because you have less staff than is realistic for that department. Is that what you do offer? Do you have the ability to say?
No, we don't offer, well, it's more on a macro scale, where if you have more claims, your rates are gonna be more per worker hour.
So then when you become, then there's no way that you really be more liable than.
Yes, well, one of the things we do, and we have done, is if you have frequent claims, we can put deductibles in place. Saying, look, it's not fair that everyone else is continually paying for these wrecked vehicles. So now, rather than a $5,000 deductible, what they want, you now have a $50,000 deductible. Or we can limit coverages, and we can even go so far as do what's called a member action plan for those poor performers that are basically ignoring or not following risk management advice or acting contrary to best practices. We can work with that member. We have what's called a municipal, and we gotta have a process, gotta have your due process for everything. We have what's called a member action plan, where we would work with those members, make sure that they're adhering to that practice and hopefully reduce that exposure. And if not, ultimately, we've gone so far to remove members from the pool.
Any other questions from council?
And I will say membership is more privileged. We have members that want to join that I've refused and said, no, you're not a fit, because one, their loss history is adverse. Because we know that when we bring members in, it's going to impact everybody else as well.
Councilmember Supple?
Yeah, can you just kind of run down the list of, things that you insure for the city, like buildings, automobiles?
Buildings, autos, pumps, lift houses, any asset you have that could be a loss through fire, wind, peril, we have an all-risk peril, earthquake, we can insure with a deductible that the city chooses.
So we are insured against earthquakes?
Yes, which I'm actually getting increased. We have right now 165 million that we offer to the membership. It's shared. I'm getting that up to 200 million because the market's better, because it's such a good, and I'm getting a rate reduction and increasing it. So that's a soft market where I get more coverage for less premium.
Yeah, you also insure us for cybersecurity,
Yes.
sheriff's officers, so council actions, mayor actions, all that stuff too. So pretty much any asset that can be covered through insurance that isn't de minimis, but also all of it, so.
So if I was performing an act on behalf of the city, would I be covered?
As long as you're acting within the course and scope of your duties for the city and not serving on another legal entity's behalf. So if you're serving on like a fire authority that is a separate legal entity and you're serving on that board, that agency would then indemnify you because you're now serving in that capacity. But if you're acting as a council person in your capacity, yes, you're covered, as well as employees and volunteers. So we also cover your employees and your volunteers in our coverage document.
Anything else from council? All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and appreciate you serving. I know it's a daunting task. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to a presentation on Duval Municipal Code 14.08 vested rights on land use with Director Thomas.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Troy Davis. I'm with the City of Duval Community Development Department. And today I wanted to kind of follow up a little bit more on our conversation regarding the update of Chapter 1408. You'll recall earlier this year, we kind of talked about what kind of mandatory updates were required and what ones were optional. And today I just kind of want to hone in a little bit on vesting to get your feedback as I move forward in finalizing kind of our first draft. I want to make sure I'm reading the room right and on the right course. So just to give a little bit of background, what is vesting? So vesting is essentially what rules are my application held to? So when I submit an application for land use entitlement, what rules apply to the processing of that permit? Am I vested per se to the rules that are in effect at the time I submit my application, or can the rules change during the process? So when we refer to an application being vested to something, we're saying that, hey, this application is vested to the rules that were in place at the time the application came in, regardless of whether or not we change the rules down the road. In terms of vesting, that point always happens, as I mentioned, at the time of application submittal. So when I submit a valid application, the date that I submit that application is the vesting date. So whatever rules we as a city have in effect at that time would be the rules that apply to the processing of my permit. There was something I was going to say, but it slipped my mind. But anyway, oh yeah. So when I say like a valid permit, what we're saying is you actually have a legitimate permit. So this avoids the situation where someone just kind of like hastily fills something out, you know, and throws it at the city. Says, hey, I've submitted this application for, you know, site plan review. You know, you got to vest it to this date, and we look at the application, and we're like, well, you really don't have a complete application here. You're missing a whole bunch, and you didn't quite fill out everything. And so that's one thing that we avoid by saying, hey, it's got to be a legit application. But anyway, that always happens at the date that they submit an application to our department. So state statute already vests certain applications regardless of whether we as a local jurisdiction want to vest or not. And that applies to building permits, subdivision applications, and development agreements. And those were kind of born out of court cases that have occurred over through the years, and then the state legislature, you know, just over time codified those into state law. What things are exempt from vesting? So things that are exempt from vesting are things that are not determined to be local land use control regulations. These include stormwater regulations, impact fees, connection fees, and certain procedural regulations relating to the expiration date of inactive plat applications. So essentially, you know, if I'm a builder and I come in with my building permit and I, you know, submit it or whatever, I'm not necessarily vested to older impact fees that are part of the plat. I'm subject to the vesting, subject to the fees that are in place at the time of my application. And same with connection fees, stormwater regulations, those things, you know, a developer builder can't come and say, hey, wait a minute, my plat application's vested, therefore everything associated with that is vested as well, and that's not always the case. So other impactful court decisions that have taken place over time, vested rights are not waivable. So you know, say I have an application and it's vested to an old code and the city adopts a new code, but hey, that new code has some things in it that I like as an applicant, and I say, hey, you know, I realize I'm vested to these old regulations, but there's some of these new regulations I've adopted that I want to apply to my project. And that doesn't work like that. So someone can't come and kind of play both sides. Vested rights survive annexation. So again, if I've got land use entitlements in place with property that I own that's inside the urban growth boundary, but still within King County's jurisdiction, and then the city annexes me and my property, my land use entitlements are still valid, regardless of whether I'm annexed or not. Plat applications vest the developer to both the subdivision of land and the zoning laws in effect at the time of the application. So zoning laws, would be things like your setbacks, your building heights, your lot coverage, floor area ratios. So, if the city comes in and changes those zoning, regulations, even land use, of course, use, I should have mentioned, that's the most obvious zoning. I'm vested to all those land use and zoning controls that were in effect at the time of my application. Cities cannot utilize the pre-application procedure to delay the vesting point further. So if I scroll back up to our land use entitlement process here, certain applications like subdivisions and site plan reviews require a pre-application meeting with the city. And at that point, nothing vests, and we as a city cannot utilize this as a tool to delay an applicant from submitting, an application for land use entitlement. So why should applications vest? There's always reasons for and there's reasons against. The reasons for are usually pretty, straightforward. It provides certainty and predictability for everyone involved, applicants, city staff. It provides fairness and due process with that predictability. And again, it simplifies the review process for staff, because when we're actively reviewing a project and the rules change while we're actively reviewing that project, then we've got to go back to the applicant and request, certain changes to their project and kind of review things again and get things, squared out that way. So some of the reasons why, vesting can be not favorable to a city is it prevents us from applying new regulations to vested projects, right? So let's say we had a whole bunch of commercial development going on, and all these projects, involved site plan review, and we had all these applications in and we're reviewing them, and some we finish, ahead of others, and some start building and developing before others down the road. And all of a sudden we notice, hey, these projects that are building out to our current regulations, we've got some major issues here, or undesirable outcomes, I should say, that we don't like. These buildings are blocking views that are really important to people that live up the hill. Yikes, if we continue down this course, then, residents that live, farther down the hill will continue to have their views blocked as these other projects. We should go ahead and change the rules, ASAP before we, have to really approve any more of these applications. So that would be an instance where we would go in, we'd go through the process of changing the rules, and those rules would then apply to the permits that were still under active review. They would have to adjust their building heights to those new rules, to preempt those problems. So that's one kind of negative outcome, is it kind of limits our ability to mitigate for those negative impacts that we might be seeing as a result of our current development regulations. And just as a side note to that, as you guys know, changing our development regulations is really hard to do on a whim. We've got to go through environmental review, we've got to go through drafts, we've got to have discussions with Planning Commission and City Council, we've got to send drafts to the Washington State Department of Commerce for 60-day review. The process of changing any rule or regulation, within the city, at least 4 months, 4 to 6 months on a good, on a good note. So it's not like we can just suddenly, create an ordinance, a new ordinance overnight, and next week we change the rules. It's still a process that takes time. And during that time, we can't hold up, our permit reviews that are under active review saying, oh, we've got a new ordinance coming. We're going to hold back on our review of these applications until we get that adopted. We can't do that. So always something to keep in mind. And the second point, kind of just rides on everything I said, the inability to change course during project review or development. So, even before we get to building stage and we're reviewing a project for development, we may come across, a proposal that meets our development regulations, our zoning regulations, but shoot, there's a huge flaw in our zoning regulations, and we know this is going to create an issue. And so we want to change the rules so that we can avoid, repeating this issue before anything gets built. And again, so it makes things kind of challenging in that regard. So again, just kind of reiterate on this point, when would application of vesting occur? And that's when they've submitted a valid and complete application is submitted to the city for review. Simple as that. So the other kind of question that may pop up is, hey, can an applicant lose their vesting? And the answer is yes. Vesting is not eternal. It does have provisions in any kind of vesting that can result in somebody losing it. If I'm an applicant and I withdraw my application, I've lost my vesting. I can't withdraw it and then resubmit and say, hey, well, aren't I still vested? If the application is expired, so hey, if they, are not responsive to corrections or moving forward, and they just kind of sit there on their application and the clock, runs out, then they lose their vesting. And then of course, if an application is denied, they, that lose their vesting, they can submit a new application, but then their new application is vested to the rules that are in place at the time they submit the new application. And another time that vesting can expire is when the approval date expires. So we've actually had, I think in the city of Duval, in the time I've been there, we've had at least 1 or 2 plats, that have expired. They were granted preliminary plat approval, obviously vested to older codes. Regulations changed over that time, but the applicant never moved forward with his application, and his application, their application expired after 5 years, and so they lost their vesting. And so when a new owner came in to plat the property, they had to adhere to new rules, which resulted in fewer lots than what was previously approved. So that was an instance where vesting was lost, and so those kind of things, happen. So one thing to always, sometimes we might get worried about is, hey, if I've got vesting, the person never loses it. Well, not always the case. So Planning Commission input. So we had this conversation, I believe, in October or September with the Planning Commission about the whole vesting process and what it entails, similar to tonight. The Planning Commission unanimously expressed support for expanding the city's vesting rights beyond building permits and development agreements and subdivisions, to apply to all other land use entitlements that are non-legislative, I should add. And so really kind of the question that I have for the city council is does the council find that vesting of permits would be, a community value, something that you support, something that the community would support? And if so, why? And if not, why not? Anyway, just here to get your feedback on that.
You got her thoughts on this? Councilwoman?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned there are some that are required by law that we have to vest. I think you listed permits, certain permits, building permits, maybe, or maybe not permits. Anyway, maybe, I think what would be helpful for me is to see which ones are current, required by state law, and what are the other ones that haven't been given vesting, but then would under this greater expanded optional version of vesting.
Yeah, so I thought I had my window up here. I can share real quick here. If I can pull up the right page, Boom, boom. Okay. So in 1408, currently you'll see that there are 6 application types. This is proposed to to shrink down to 4 types, but that's neither here nor there. But building permits right now are permit types that do vest regardless of local ordinance or not. So building permits for new homes, new commercial buildings, whatever we issue building permits for would remain vested. Here in type 3 category, the ones that would vest are preliminary subdivisions and preliminary short subdivisions. And then over in what would be in this category here on the far right, which are development agreements because it's legislative decision. Legislative decisions are regulated elsewhere in the land use code, which is why it's not showing up in this chart here. But if it did, it would be a type 6 here. But those are the only 3 that vest. All these other permit types that you see through here currently don't vest. And if we didn't expand vesting, they would continue to not vest in the future. So that includes, your shoreline permits, your site plans for parks, your site plans for commercial developments, your boundary line adjustments, your site plans, master development plans, and those sorts of things are all examples of entitlements that wouldn't vest.
Yeah, you had the one slide sort of early in the deck about sort of for and against arguments, and I think you had sort of primary to the inability to apply new regulations and then the inability to change course. The one example I'm thinking is sort of more recent memory is the changes we made around the tree retention policies, and obviously there was a lot of feedback from the community when they saw these developments being cleared of trees because they were vested. Are there any, and I'm being a little unfair, Troy, sort of asking this in the spur of the moment, but similar gotchas from these other types of permits we've discussed, like the unintended consequences that we should be thinking about beyond sort of the high level. Obviously, inability to apply regulations is a very broad swath, but if there's any specific things of the council that we should take into consideration as part of our recommendation back to staff.
Yeah, so any kind of land use regulation in Title 14 that controls the use of land, has that potential, right? So when it comes to vesting, and the reason why with our tree protection ordinance, for example, where we had older plats, where they were able to remove more trees, even though we had already changed the rules, that's an example of, hey, that plat was vested to, the regulations in place at the time that the plat was approved. And so even though we've strengthened our tree protection ordinance, we can't go back, to that subdivision and say, you can't take out, these trees anymore. But that still applies, whether or not we expand vested rights or not, because plats fall under that purview of already being granted vesting, regardless of what we do as a city. Where it would be impactful is for a site plan review. So site plan reviews are done for like new commercial developments, right? So let's say we have a new commercial development come in, and let's say we, expanded vesting to cover site plan review permit applications. And let's just say that commercial lot was heavily treed, and our tree protection ordinance wasn't where we wanted it to be as a city yet. And an applicant in the meantime comes in and they apply for development. And, under our current regulations, they can pretty much take out all the trees to build their commercial development. Then that would be a consequence, because that site plan review application would be vested to the rules in place at the time they submitted their application. So if our tree protection rules, whatever they were at the time, that they submitted the application for that new commercial development, those would be the rules that apply. We wouldn't be able to kind of say, hey, let's, we don't like this course of action. We recognize that there's a hole in our tree protection ordinance that doesn't save enough, what we feel would be enough trees on our commercial properties that require site plan review. Let's get these rules changed as quickly as we can. And if they change before we grant approval, then the applicant has to, go back and adjust his site plan to preserve more trees to be compliant with the new rules. So in this case, it is kind of important to be mindful of that. But I personally think and professionally think that it's going to be your site plan review applications that are, expanding vested rights to site plan review applications that are going to have the biggest impact. Because right now, it would be subdivisions, but subdivisions already vest regardless. Site plan review, your other permits and stuff are pretty minor, minor potatoes, I would say. And so the consequences wouldn't be quite as visible there. But your site plan review applications, the consequences would be most visible there.
Council, I have one and then, Councilmember Isaacson, and then I'll go, and then we'll circle back to Councilmember.
But, trying to read through the memo that was sent out with this, Troy, thanks for writing all that up too, but still, I'm still trying to figure out what's the benefit to the city to do this? Or read it as it's best for the applicants. So I'm just trying to say, what was the precedent for it? What pushed this to come forward? Why would we want to do this as a city?
Yeah. So it's a values question in part, and also, in terms of staff. So the values question. So if you as a council feel that, as a body or as a city that it would be a matter of fairness for applicants, if that's something that you hold as a value, then vesting would be important. If it's not a value you have, then we don't have to do it, if that's, kind of the feedback. In terms of a practical stance, it does assist staff to allow projects to vest at the time that they are submitted, because it makes it easier and more timely for us to process those applications. So if we have applications in and we're processing them and we're changing the rules at the same time while these applications are in process, it does take longer and more staff time and focus to review those applications, communicate those changes with applicants, get things changed, and resubmitted. Not the end of the world, something we can do, but that's just kind of sort of an impact, right? So it's just like, the easiest thing I compare it to is just like if you're playing a game with friends, and the rules change, or you decide to change the rules halfway through the game, it can make things seem unfair for some people. It can benefit others better. It's just, usually people don't like it when you change the rules of the game when you're in the middle of a game. But again, there could be instances where it might be necessary to change the rules, during the game if you're worried about an outcome that, you don't want. But again, changing the rules during the process, again, takes time, right? So say we have an application in and we're reviewing it and we notice kind of these red flags and we say, hey, we should probably change the rules on this so we don't get the desired outcome. We still have to continue processing that application. So we can't put the brakes on that application, say, oh, we realized we got some rules we've got to change because we're getting some outcomes that we feel aren't desirable. We're going to put the brakes on you. We're going to change the rules and then we'll get back to you. It doesn't work like that. We would still have to continue to process their application. And just based on staffing and allotments and deadlines, our review priorities go towards short range planning, which is application processing. So Again, the processing of the application is what would take priority, not taking the time and the staff time to do the long range planning, which is changing the rules. And so it wouldn't necessarily, if we had a project in, it wouldn't necessarily work out such that we could get the rules changed before we got the application processed anyway. But again, depending on kind of the market in terms of what's going on and how many, development applications we're getting at a time, it would be beneficial to, be able to change the rules sooner than later, so that future applications that come in, would be subject to those new rules. But again, that the rate that we process and get applications in, it doesn't necessarily have an impact in that way, because we would get the legislation done anyway, and a new application would come in, and they would be, they'd have to adhere to those new rules anyway. If we were like a super huge city, getting tons of, commercial permit applications in for site plan review all the time, then yeah, that impact could be more quick and more effectful. But being that we're a small city and we don't have tons of commercial permits coming in all the time, it's easier for us to kind of change course before new permit applications come in, so the vesting wouldn't become such an issue. But again, it just depends, what we value. If we are more concerned, or if we have a value towards, ensuring that we have the right rules in place and avoid any kind of negative outcomes as much as possible, then we would probably want to go the non-vesting route. If we value predictability and certainty and what some may argue is fairness for an applicant, then you would want to probably go the vesting route.
So I just wanted to clarify too, we're just talking about the different kinds, not necessarily the timing, like the time allotment that vesting is good for, correct? That is not what they're talking about, like the planning commission being in favor of changing?
Yeah, no, because we're not talking about so much about timing of vesting as just to whether or not we're interested in vesting. As I kind of touched on a little bit, vesting, does have its limits. So in the draft code, you would see, certain points in time where an applicant could lose their vesting, based on certain criteria, whether their application goes inactive for a certain number of days, whether they withdraw their application, those sorts of things. Then the applicant loses their vesting. So those are just kind of like side effects of vesting. So like I mentioned vesting earlier, vesting isn't always permanent. Even if you're vested to certain rules, you can still lose your vesting, based on certain actions or inactions of the applicant.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, my biggest concern is making sure, because we're not the largest city and we have limited space left. So just making sure that as we develop out, that if we make changes in code, that those will be reflected as much as possible in new developments, regardless of the kind they are. I live next to one of the plats that had expired and was used as an example for when we were changing the tree and sensitive area code. And the difference between before and after was huge. It was very significant. And then also seeing, the community's reaction to developments that, were clear cut or might have looked different had they been vested after that code. So I think for me, that's the biggest concern overall, is just making sure that we don't make such a change that makes it too almost not worth changing code. If we don't have enough land left to even bother, with improvements, if people aren't happy with what they're seeing in the community. Who was it Councilmember Napoli? Oh, so who felt, and then okay.
This is just a clarification question. Does this only apply to subdivisions, or does it apply to, like, say, the last big thing I can remember, like the vet, and they expanded their building? Because I don't know if it's true, but I just heard that they had revision after revision after revision, and in that case, I'm thinking, wow, to have that vested would have been a lot easier for them.
I apologize. Can you repeat your second question? Because
I'm just wondering if it applies to other building, like, say, a business in town that's expanding their building.
oh, okay. Yeah. So, for the first part of your question, gosh, I'll answer your second part. I'm kind of brain dead. So yeah, so if you've got an existing building and you're expanding, so you're doing an addition or whatever, that usually triggers a site plan review permit and a building permit, and your application would be subject to the rules in place that you submit at the time you submit those applications. So right now, regardless of what we do as a city, building permits, subdivision applications, and development agreements vest to code that we have in place at the time those applications are submitted. So, if I've already got a building in an established commercial use, and I want to expand it, I'm subject to the rules that are in place at the time I go to expand my building, not subject to the rules at the time of the place when my building was built. So if I built my building in 1990, I'm not vested to the rules that were in place in 1990 when I go to expand my building. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I'm asking if it's vested at the time when you started the application, if currently things. Yeah, wait,
I
you
think
got it.
Director Lanchewski wants to weigh in.
So Troy, I think the question is, I'll break it down maybe once. Currently subdivisions are vested. You're not looking to change vesting of short or long plats.
Correct, because that's required by state.
Okay, and then a building permit, for example, and the question here is specific to the Duval vet. They were vested to building and site plan review codes at time of completed application, and the codes that they were designing and building to did not change after they were completed, correct?
Well, their building permit vested, their site plan review application did not.
Okay. So there's two separate things, the building itself and then the stuff around the building itself.
Yeah.
Thank you. And,
Bugger.
Member Napoli?
So for me, I really, my value, and I think a lot of the people who.
Hey, hold on. Troy, you're still there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
A lot of the people in the
There he is.
community, I think, really are concerned about outcomes. And so my concern with expanding vesting is you kind of allow for a gaming of the system, because they catch wind that the council's maybe gonna make changes. They jump to vest, they're not really necessarily ready to do something, but they want to get locked in just in case. They lock in, they get to watch and see what happens, then they can just pull their application out and then revest after, right? I mean, so it kind of allows someone potentially to have some flexibility in, do I want the old code or the new code? Now, you can't piecemeal it, a little of old, little of new, but like you could just abandon your application and then come back in and apply later under new code. It just feels like what I've seen is if the community thinks code is changing and they're afraid it's gonna be more restrictive, they jump into vest and then they're locked in code that we know we don't like. We're trying to change it because it's bad. The community's unhappy and they can jump in and vest for their benefit in a lot of cases. And so I think that really makes it difficult for meaningful change to happen because people can jump in and invest. They see something.
Yeah. Well, there is some natural incentive not to just jump in, primarily because the cost and time that's consumed in preparing an application is a lot. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's hard for any one person to just kind of like, jump in and get their foot in the door, just, to sit there. And then even if they do manage to do that, they can't just sit on that if you know what I mean. So if they throw their application in, then the ball is rolling. We're reviewing it, we're processing it, we're doing all those things with it. You know, they can't just, you know, sit there or choose to sit there. But yeah, I definitely understand your point because yeah, with certain projects like that where, and unfortunately, it's hard to use subdivisions as a good example because the vesting comes from the state, but that's where we see it, right? So, you know, if subdivisions weren't vested or able to be vested, you know, then yeah, we could have a, a bigger impact by not, you know, vesting those applications. But but yeah, it's complex, but in theory, you know, somebody could, you know, put their foot in the door. But again, there's so much time and expense to just doing that that it would discourage that alone, I think would discourage people from doing it.
I want more time to think about it.
I wanted to check in with Director Thomas really quick, and then we may need to wrap up due to time and have council members, we might have lost everybody. Oh, no, they just froze. And have council members email in any
That's what I
additional
was
feedback they have. But I just wanted to check with Director Thomas if he had a quick.
Yeah, I'm going to be really quick. And by the way, I'm pretty unstable here. My power keeps flickering. So hopefully I'll be able to remain online in the same way. But what I wanted to say, one of the items that we have struggled most with is where we have site plan review expiring, honestly, for our commercial permits, because our site plan review is only vested for 2 years. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer for commercial development to get up and running. And sometimes we have a site plan review application that is also part of a subdivision application. So a subdivision application is automatically vested by state law for 5 years, but our site plan is only good for 2 years. So then it requires an applicant to come back in before they've even potentially finished their subdivision. But most of our issues are really with our commercial development applications expiring the site plan where they've already gone through and maybe even sometimes are getting ready to start a project. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So I
Thank you.
think you have a date that you would want feedback from council, or is this gonna come back to another CAL or a council meeting in the future?
We are going to
We can
come
continue
back.
discussion.
We are going to come back. The reason why this whole section is being done is because the state is adding different vesting dates to essentially our projects. So that's why this whole code is being updated. So at that time, we wanted to just check in on vesting in general. So if we hadn't had state statute changes, we would not be talking about this.
Perfect, thank you. So it sounds like it'll come back at another meeting as well. This is a first touch. So with that, we're gonna go and adjourn at 7:04. Thanks, everyone.
recording. He wanted me to check one thing. I'm on that.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, November 19th, Duval City Council meeting to order at 7:08 PM. If you'll all please rise. And join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you please take the roll?
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor Okerlander,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
Here.
Mr. Isaacson,
Here.
Mrs. Schaefer, Mr. Mercer,
Here.
Mr. Supple,
Here.
Ms. Naplin,
Here.
Ms. Kufeld.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a forum. And,
Just under absences, Councilmember Schaefer is gone tonight for, medical reasons, so, I know additions and corrections are next, but we have our absences both, so I just wanted to move to excuse them there, and if we could add that to that answer.
great, thank you. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve this evening's council agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Moving on to proclamations this evening, we have 4. And I will go ahead and read them into the record. The first is National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. Whereas National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week is observed annually in November, serving as a crucial platform to raise awareness about the pervasive issues of hunger and homelessness within our communities and across the nation. And whereas millions of individuals and families across the United States grapple daily with the harsh realities of food insecurity and a lack of stable housing, challenges that profoundly impact their health, well-being, and overall quality of life. And whereas it is essential to acknowledge that hunger and homelessness do not discriminate, they affect people of all ages, races, and backgrounds, revealing the urgent need for our collective efforts to address these pressing social issues with compassion and determination. And whereas this week serves as an invaluable opportunity for the residents of Duval to deepen their understanding of the local resources, support organizations, and initiatives dedicated to alleviating hunger and homelessness, fostering a more informed and engaged community. And whereas we commend the unwavering efforts of local organizations, dedicated volunteers, and community members who work tirelessly to provide assistance, advocacy, and support for those in need, demonstrating the true spirit of compassion and solidarity. And whereas we recognize that addressing hunger and homelessness requires a united front, we encourage all citizens to actively participate in activities that promote awareness, compassion, and concrete actions aimed at ending these injustices in our community. And whereas by engaging in service projects, donation drives, and educational initiatives, we can all contribute to creating a community where everyone has access to nutritious food and stable housing, reinforcing the belief that no one should have to choose between food and shelter. And whereas it is our shared responsibility to advocate for systemic changes that address the root causes of hunger and homelessness, ensuring that our community becomes a place where all individuals and families can thrive without fear of instability or deprivation. Now therefore, I, Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, do hereby proclaim November 17th, 2024 through November 23rd, 2024, National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week in the City of Duval. I urge all citizens to join in this effort to raise awareness, foster compassion, and take actionable steps to support our neighbors in need. Let us work together to build a stronger, more inclusive community where everyone has the opportunity to lead a healthy, stable, and fulfilling life. The second proclamation this evening is the Transgender Day of Remembrance. Whereas each year on November 20th, communities around the world unite for Transgender Day of Remembrance, a global event that solemnly honors the memory of those whose lives were tragically lost due to anti-transgender violence. And whereas the City of Duval not only acknowledges but opposes the unique hardships faced by transgender individuals, including discrimination, prejudice, and disproportionate violence, the city stands firmly against all forms of hatred, bigotry, and intolerance. And whereas Transgender Day of Remembrance is a solemn occasion to reflect on the lives lost, offer support to transgender individuals, and reaffirm our shared commitment to fostering an environment where all people, regardless of gender identity or expression, are safe, valued, and free to be their authentic selves. This commitment unites us and fuels our determination to create a more inclusive society. Whereas the resilience, courage, and contributions of transgender individuals enrich our community, and we acknowledge the paramount importance of ensuring that every person, without exception, is treated with dignity, respect, and kindness. Now therefore, I, Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, do hereby proclaim November 20th, 2024 as Transgender Day of Remembrance in the City of Duval. We honor the memory of those lost and pledge our support for transgender rights, inclusion, and safety. Let us work together to build a world of love, acceptance, and respect for all. The next one is Thanksgiving Day. Whereas Thanksgiving is a cherished and time-honored tradition in our great nation, celebrated annually on the fourth Thursday of November as a day dedicated to gratitude, reflection, and community connection. And whereas this special occasion invites us to gather joyfully with family and friends, fostering a spirit of togetherness as we express our heartfelt appreciation for the myriad blessings in our lives and sharing the abundance that surrounds us. And whereas we recognize the profound importance of giving thanks for the love, support, and companionship of those dear to us, as well as for the rich natural resources and beauty of the Pacific Northwest that sustain and nurture our community. And whereas Thanksgiving serves as a poignant reminder to extend our compassion and support to those who are less fortunate within our community, fostering a spirit of goodwill, charity, and shared responsibility that reflects our deepest values. And whereas the City of Duval is a vibrant community woven together by the threads of neighborly support, shared purpose, and a steadfast commitment to creating a welcoming and inclusive environment for all residents, regardless of background. And whereas we encourage all residents of Duval to celebrate this Thanksgiving by fully embracing the values of gratitude, kindness, and unity, recognizing the power of our collective efforts to uplift one another. And whereas we invite our community to engage in local initiatives that support those in need, whether through food drives, volunteering, or simply offering a helping hand to our neighbors. Now therefore, I, Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, do hereby proclaim November 28th, 2024, Thanksgiving Day in the City of Duval. I urge all residents to reflect on the blessings of the past year, to gather with loved ones in celebration, and to commit acts of kindness and generosity that will strengthen the bonds of our community for years to come. The last one today is Small Business Saturday. Whereas Small Business Saturday is joyfully celebrated each year on the Saturday following Thanksgiving, serving as a powerful reminder of the vital role that small businesses play in the fabric of our communities. It encourages our residents to actively support and uplift their local economies. And whereas small businesses stand as the backbone of our economy, driving innovation, creating meaningful employment opportunities, and offering distinctive products and services that enrich the cultural and social landscape of our community. And whereas the City of Duval takes immense pride in its vibrant tapestry of local businesses, which not only contribute to our community's unique character and charm, but also enhance our overall quality of life. And whereas supporting small businesses does more than just stimulate our local economy, it fosters a deep sense of community, strengthens connections among residents, and promotes an environment where relationships can flourish. And whereas we wholeheartedly acknowledge and celebrate the unwavering dedication, perseverance, and hard work of small business owners and their employees, who tirelessly invest their time, resources, and passion into making our community thrive. And whereas we fervently encourage all citizens of Duval to embrace the spirit of local patronage by shopping local, dining local, and engaging with the diverse array of businesses that contribute to making Duval an exceptional place to live, work, and play. Now, therefore, I, Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, do hereby proclaim November 30th, 2024, as Small Business Saturday in the City of Duval. I urge all residents to join in recognizing and supporting the incredible contributions of our local businesses to our community's prosperity and vibrancy. All right, now we will move on to comments from the audience. And we've got the rules listed already, so we've got a packed agenda, so I'm going to skip over that, but we do have three members
2 members signed up to, 2 that have signed up, but we have multiple opportunities for public comment, so. Jennifer Martin, do you want to give a general public comment, or do you want to give public comment for either the school impact or your park trails open space here?
Park Trails Open Space.
Okay, that will come, further on the agenda, and then David Andrews, same question for you.
Same answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda? So. It's been moved and seconded to approve this evening's consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Moving on to scheduled items. First up is the mayor's report. I've got a lot, but I will try to be brief tonight. First of all, I wanted to share with the council that I was one of 415 local elected leaders who signed a letter with the National League of Cities and other organizations to urge Congress to replenish FEMA disaster relief. That has been an ongoing challenge, as there's been 160 nationally declared disasters since 2023. And that FEMA funding is vital for recovery and economic recovery after a disaster. I wanted to also share the Association of Washington Cities is having a listening session on the 10th of December to discuss revenue options. As we all know, as cars become more efficient, fuel tax is going down, which makes it much more difficult to fund our state roads, as well as the cost of increased construction is really damaging our ability to maintain our infrastructure in Washington State. So there will be discussing a road usage fee, as well as a potential proposal for a retail delivery fee in the coming legislative session. They will have representatives of the Washington Transportation Commission and others there to participate. So I highly encourage council to participate in that session if you can. Today, the Association of Washington Cities Executive Committee and Center for Quality Communities Committee, Executive Committee, and the Retro Board met to discuss budgets and policy moving forward for the 2025 year. Wanted to remind folks that SBGA is tomorrow night, the annual meeting that the Snoqualmie Tribe hosts up at the casino. So it looks like it's going to be a great agenda and great meal and opportunity to connect with folks. Finally, I did want to share that, actually 2 more items. I wanted to let council be aware that, make sure you're aware that the Association of Washington Cities annual city conditions report is out, of which there are some very prescient pieces of information, including how cities are managing the reduction in revenues in their budgets, and very high on the list is revenue increases for cities across the board, and concerns about property tax. So lots of great information there for everyone to look at. Finally, I had the pleasure of attending the National League of Cities conference last week. It was a fantastic meeting, lots of excellent information, a significant focus on public safety and AI. But one of the meetings that really stuck out was the annual meeting of the Western Municipal Association, which is the states of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, California, Oregon, Idaho, etc. The number one issue that was on the agenda to discuss is challenges with property tax and the ability to fund city government across the entire West Coast, western half of the United States. We are not the only jurisdiction. Washington State is not the only state that is running into challenges with funding local government because of how the state legislatures have chosen to allow options. And many of our city partners in other states are in crisis mode, even worse than we are. So I wanted to share that to illustrate that not only is it important to us that we have options and we are able to sustain our cities, but it is important to all of those across the West Coast, regardless of political affiliation, that it's the same issues. The actual taxing structures are slightly different, but it is crisis mode in many, many locations throughout the West. So I think that reemphasizes the importance taking proper action to get our budget to sustainability and resiliency, as well as the importance of citywide advocacy at both the state and federal level for not only new opportunities for revenue sources that are residents and the city, but also the opportunities for flexibility within those just to fund basic government. And then I will just say, finally, that for the 100th celebration of the National League of Cities, it was an absolutely incredible event. The speakers were unbelievable, and the celebration was something to remember for sure. And I know that the Mayor Pro Tem has some things to share about that conference, and I will leave the rest of that to her. But with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the City Administrator's report.
Thank you. Hopefully this will show up very short tonight. Let's see if I can move it to slideshow. So community development wanted to offer a quick update so today's Tuesday, so yeah, yesterday. Duval hosted the King County Community Wildfire Protection Plan meeting. The focus really is on risk and available data. They're working on a homework assignment right now about how to define the wildland urban interface mouthful. So this will be in the document center following this meeting. So please go ahead and take a look at this slide. Director Thomas has put in quite a bit of good information on slides that group is sharing on managing the wildland urban interface. Next slide, we'll pass it over to Director Lanchewski since he's here in person.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens, staff. Steve Lanchewski, Public Works. Today's been a great day. Winter season preparations are helping us prepare for today. Emergency equipment has been tuned up and ready. The top corner picture was this morning's tree fall incident on Woodinville-Duval Road, which closed it starting about 5 a.m. The bottom image is actually the projected wind model expectations throughout the day. The peak purple is a certain model, red, yellow, blue, different models. The peak time is about 9 p.m. on that graph, and then dwindling a little bit after lunch tomorrow for another little bit of wind. 142nd Street sidewalk, they completed all the paving and concrete work just today, so they'll be wrapping up plantings later this week. Concrete work downtown here on Main Street for the rapid flashing beacons completed today. 3rd Avenue, there is going to be a lot of exploration of underground utilities. So APS is a consultant hired through our engineering outfit to go and verify the physical horizontal and vertical locations of all the utilities underground. We had quite a few bits of incomplete and improper information in all the physical as-built and drawings we had. So they're verifying. And then we're doing survey work this week at the new properties adjacent to the Big Rock ball fields. Good. Questions, comments?
Yeah, it reminded me of a situation that happened kind of in my neighborhood. We suddenly had a proliferation of locates everywhere in my neighborhood, like all up and down it. No one knew what it was. We called the city didn't know. We were like, how do we figure this out? And I discovered there is a website that will list every single locate request. It's open to the public. And I looked it up and it sounds like Whitley is requesting it. And so I don't know, maybe that will ring a bell. I don't know if the city is aware of what Zipley might be doing in my neighborhood. And just for other people who might start seeing this in their neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yours is about more than 50% through the process. So they've been in a lot of other neighborhoods. We can't control when someone calls 1-800 locator 811. We normally have a permit associated with a large activity like that. They had a permit, it expired. We would not have approved them going out. They can do locates. We don't like it when they aren't complying with the process we put in place for these large system locates. So we have to work with them. But yes, Zipley, and not only Zipley, Astound is redoing some work, and then Comcast is coming. They're dragging and pushing internet under every road in town.
Yes.
And Comcast will be. Yep. So that's what that's for. So they have to locate all the utilities, collect that information, go back, get their plans done on how they're going to install, because they're going to push, right, 2-inch conduit through drilled mechanisms, and then try to sell people internet. We are a non-franchise city. No, your front yard, and again, your front yard is, there's a difference between your yard, your property, and the right of way. All the right of way in most of our town is 60 feet. So if your road's 25 feet wide, there's how many feet left? 35 between you and your neighbors across the street. So there's likely 17.5 feet of other people's right of way that is front yard, which is right of way. So we try to make notice. We try to give notice. We require them when they go through our process to send in notice to the neighborhood in a letter. We don't want to know and be yelled at. We want their PM to be listed with a phone number. So there, you should get more information. Again, they jump the gun. So you get Larissa mad and then they're in real trouble. So yeah.
Was mad.
Oh, she was mad, believe me. Yeah. Yeah. So
This is sort of related, there appear to be pulling cable down from Mountain Hill as well, sort of across the valley. I'm assuming that's probably part of the related.
wherever they can do it
Project.
aerially, they're going to do it aerially. And then when they have to go underground, they're going underground.
Questions for Director Lashewski? Okay, finally, Thursday, we are having staff training day. So, we do this annually with staff. This year, we're focusing on First Amendment auditors, revised HR policies. We are doing some driver safety training, which is, helpful given the presentation from our insurer or our pool provider, this evening. And then we're discussing, providing customer service and supporting folks with disabilities at work. City Hall and other departments will be closed for Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving. We are finalizing our recruitment for our finance associate. That's underway. We had 66 applications. We're interviewing 2 of our stronger candidates in the next few days. Light Up Duval preparations are almost complete. That event takes place, first weekend in December. We have another stargazing event, the last of the year at Big Rock, assuming no wind, no rain, that looks like this. On December 6th. And then last night I attended King County Councilmember Perry's town hall that she had here at the Visitor Center. She's very much encouraging Duval to put in a grant. She has a couple grant opportunities that will become open in January. So we had a nice talk about those programs and where some of our ideas might fit into that. So we'll be certainly taking advantage of those opportunities. And then finally, I just wanted to show some of our material that we put together for our December events. Really excited about them. The Duval Express is one of the events that we're partnering with a bunch of agencies here in the city. So Northwest Arts Center, the Historical Society are partnering with us to hold that event, and that's one that is funded by the Port of Seattle. And then, of course, we have the Light Up Duval event. We're very excited about that as well. So any questions for me, Mayor Vernon?
Quick question, or more of a comment too, for the Duval Express one. I'm so excited. All the graphics look amazing, by the way. I think some people, because of our closeness to Snoqualmie, and they have an actual train.
Yeah.
Just some clarification on expectations from the community that there's not a large train ride.
It is
probably
a small,
Yeah.
child-sized riding train.
No tracks.
What?
No tracks.
No tracks. It's, powered little mini train.
Okay.
That we will be, and we're gonna develop, hopefully we're doing the graphic now, little train ticket for our young friends, to get on the train. It will bring people here to the visitor center. Downstairs with the Northwest Arts Center is going to be Cocoa and Crafts. Up here will be, a group that's bringing in Legos to help, build Lego trains. And then the Historical Society is doing a train event that they got trains from the Snoqualmie train center to do a train event in the depot. So the little mini child-sized train We'll bring people to the visitor center and then back around to the depot. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for city administrator? All right, we'll move on to council reports. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share this evening? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
So I also went to the city summit for National League of Cities. It was awesome. I am still downloading everything. I have a lot of notes. In particular, I'm gonna keep it short because I really would like to get through our meeting before we lose power, but there's just a lot that I learned, and there's this infrastructure hub that I'm gonna send info to administration so that they can forward that to staff, because it is a program geared more towards staff, and a lot of resources available to help with grants for infrastructure and the challenges of implementation, not just getting the grant. And then a lot of things I would like to share with the Historical Society too, that could be really good partners and economic development. But the most exciting thing and completely unexpected is they had a scavenger hunt kind of thing called Digital Dash. So as I went around the conference, they had QR codes and you scanned it, you got entered for a prize, and I won the big prize, which is 3 conference, what's it called, registrations for the congressional conference in March for our city, including 3 nights per each of those 3 registrations at the hotel, which is a huge cost. I cannot believe I got that, and I made sure they knew it went to a very small city where that would be difficult to do. So if you've ever thought about going or wanting to go, we have a big opportunity that we wouldn't usually have, so I just want to throw that out.
And I would note that there were over 4,000 attendees, city elected officials and staff from across the country. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands completed, but I know at last I looked, there was at least 500. So I'll share, personal privilege. Amy was Mayor Pro Tem was at a different table. I was with Association Washington City staff, and they were counting down, and they said, this is the winner, grand prize winner is someone from Washington State. And they're like, it's somebody from Duval, Washington. So the National League of City staff thought it was me, and I'm like, nope, not me. Not me. I didn't finish the scavenger hunt. And then so they said what city it was from, and then they said Mayor Pro Tem's name, and everybody from Washington screamed and clapped. And I think one of the neat things that came out of it as well is there were a lot more conversations spurred as a result of that with people that I don't think either of us would have ever had conversations with had not that been the case. So multiple layers of goodness that came out of that. Anyone else have anything they'd like to report? All right, well, let's get down to our serious business here. We have a presentation this evening on the Parks, Trails, and Open Spaces Capital Improvement Plan from Larissa Grandel, our city engineer.
Well, that name has changed, and it's going to be a team approach due to the weather. So I don't know.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm up and running. Steve, I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. We'll see if it works. Hopefully it will. Let's see.
Blame Oscar if it doesn't.
Blame Oscar if it doesn't. It looks like I'm sharing the screen. It's not in quite the right mode, but I'm trying not to glitch anything out because the power keeps flickering. So good evening, Mayor and Council, and if there's anybody from the community out there. So this evening, Steve and I will be talking about the CIP. Now that we're getting a little bit further into the process of adopting our Parks, Trails, and Open Space plan, we thought it was a great opportunity to talk about our CIP. Larissa and Steve and myself have been really grinding into the details over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks on this. So it's getting pretty final at this point. And so we wanted to come and talk to you. So let's talk about how did we get here? Well, the first thing we did is we contracted with a consultant to help us update our Parks, Trails, and Open Space plan. We mailed a survey to our community. We completed a parks conditions assessment and analysis. We had focus group meetings with our partners, whether that was the Tribe, King County, the school district, and our park rec user group. We also hosted 4 steering committee meetings. We hosted 2 open houses. We did some pop-up events during the spring and summer. We also did watershed evaluations and level service analysis. We also have had joint planning commission and city council meeting. And we've also talked at planning commission and city council for the last several months. So in your packet, you will find that we also attached the CIP list so that you could take a look at that. And we also provided you with the PTOS plan, and then obviously a couple mats for both the park CIP and the trail CIP. You'll see that they're color coded. So as we go along and talk, you'll be able to follow along with that as well. So we have obviously our proposed 2024 level service standards that we've looked at. These are pretty common standards. You can see that we're deficient in 2 of our areas, neighborhood parks and pocket parks, and in community parks. But we do have a surplus in trails, but it helps to have 1 mile of trail completely along Snoqualmie Valley Trail because that's included in our calculation. We're also working on the park impact fee. That is currently under contract, and this will be calculated based on this project list. And that work is starting to occur now. We just got some data to our consultant. So in December, they'll be working through that. We also broke our CIP up into 3 time periods, the short term, midterm, and long term. Our short term is 0 to 5 years, midterm is 6 to 10, and our long term is 11 to 20. So you'll see that we do have a full CIP of about $72 million, and that is in our 2024 dollars. We do have park impact fee credit eligible projects, which means they're growth related, and that is about $66 million. We assume 10% are in grants for a not growth related portion. And then we also look at potential city match. So that's how we look at this information. And then down at the bottom, you can see some of our math where we have the deficiency. So for example, neighborhood parks and community parks, but you don't see that deficiency in the trails. We have just a little bit of a surplus, but not much. We have also grouped our projects. So if you look at that CIP list in your packet, you'll see them under acquisition, planning and permitting, renovation, repair, development and expansion, obviously trails, and then system-wide programs as well. So that's like a trail system plan. So that's one of the items that we have in there, a tree management plan, a park signage program, a tree management program, natural area stewardship program. So those are things that we have that are embedded as well. So let's talk a little bit about the short term. So our short term, that 0 to 5 years, is about $15.8 million for that total cost in 2024. In little parentheses, you'll see project costs include an inflation factor of about 3.5%. In this first period, we don't have any acquisitions. As you know, we just completed several acquisitions over the last couple of years. We do have planning and permitting costs, and those are about $260,000. We also have renovation and repair at about $900,000. Sorry for the typo, I apologize. I just noticed that. And that's for a restroom and roof and shelter replacement. And then we also have a large project, which is we consider development and expansion, and that's at Big Rock Ball Fields. And that's estimated at about $8.7 million. And then we also have trails at about $3.7 million, and then system-wide programs at about $320,000. And Steve, you can stop me at any time if you get questions, because I can't see anybody, by the way.
You're doing great.
Okay, thank you. In the midterm, our project costs are about $20 million. Again, there's no acquisition costs that are projected in that midterm period, but we do have obviously some planning and permitting costs. Renovation repair is about $340,000, and then expansion, development and expansion is about 15.9, and that's where we start to see more money being spent on trails at about 3.3, and then system-wide programs at just under 500,000. And so long-term, so this is like almost that 20-year period. We have a pretty large CIP. We have acquisition at about 11 million, planning and permitting is about $230,000. During that period, we don't have any renovation or repair that's planned, but there's always unplanned things, so we don't ever want to say never. Development expansion is about 50 million, and trails is where we're we're proposing quite a bit of effort. And then system-wide programs at about 400,000. This is, I know that you can't probably read it on the screen, and that's why we put it in your packet. So you can see that these are color coded, and they also go along with the map. So you'll see acquisition, planning and permitting, the repairs, development, trails, and then these strategic type things are down here, or system improvements. You'll see the project type up here where it says project type. So you'll have location and type. Is it eligible for park impact fee credit? And what is the total cost? And then we have a matching park CIP map. You'll see this little X up near Doherty Farmstead. We're still working on some of our maps. And so you'll see a final change of these maps and illustrations when we come back for adoption. And then we have our trail map as well that you see where we're estimating where we think we can put our trail system. And then our next steps are really to talk about the CIP and the estimated cost. Are there any changes to the CIP list that council would like to see or talk about? And then as we go down into December, I'll say go down the trail, we will be adopting the P2S, and that includes the CIP list. And then that will lead into our park impact fee and that analysis and what that cost looks like. And we'll be bringing that back to council this winter and holding a public hearing. And that is the last stage of the park plan, which is adopting a park impact fee. Are there any questions? Comments?
This is Councilmember Naplin. And I had thought I remembered seeing that there was maybe an idea of needing some kind of pocket park or something in the area of, maybe First in Virginia, kind of that area down in there. And I don't know if it's because it just didn't get put in the short, mid, long-term plan, or did that go away? I know there were certain areas that just really didn't have pocket parks. And I don't know that I see those in the plan. I don't know. Maybe I just am not reading it right. It's kind of my first time seeing this.
Sorry, I'm looking at the park map right now. And so I know that we were thinking about pocket parks kind of along that Main Street corridor. And we technically, let's see, that was renovation. So it doesn't look like we've actually put a pocket park in that area, like Virginia, you said Virginia and First.
Yeah, like more the north end of town, because while school is in session, you can't use that park, and it's really off limits even during aftercare. And so there really isn't, unless you cross Main Street and go into Taylor Landing, there really isn't any place for people to go who live there. And most of that neighborhood, there really aren't any yards. So there just isn't much open space in close proximity for any of those homes.
Yeah, I do see that we have a D12 and a D13 that are neighborhood pocket parks. But I am not exactly sure of the location. Let me see if I can get into, I'm just working on a small computer. So let me go back and look at the map. And if I can't get to it, then we will have to get back to you. So just give me a second and see if I can see it on the map.
D12 on the map way up kind of by Doherty Park, and it's got a big slash through it that says remove.
Yeah, so we were gonna talk about a little bit about that too, under the Parks, Trails and Open Space discussion. So last week, we went through and we're looking at the deeds for our park up there. And we have some constraints. And one of those constraints is that we can only have passive recreation. We can't do active recreation up there. And so that's why you see that taken off. We can do things like trails and things that are less active. And that is a deed restriction. We do have some potential opportunities to talk to council early-ish next year about what our options are to potentially remove that deed restriction. And so, Steve, did you want to talk about that at all?
I can. The one note on the pocket park too is they're all proximity based. So I think there was an investment of some of the opportunities at the site off of 4th, and I guess that's Bird, the old water tank site. So I know that is on the list in the yellow section. But yeah, the Doherty Farm itself does have deed restrictions on how the property was acquired. So it can have activities that are passive and then in kind with the setting. So farm type activities, not forestry, but farm, food, crop sort of activities, anything open and active with we have fences and fields, animals are fine. But yeah, we would have to go through a process to unwind how those were purchased with conservation dollars and ag dollars. So that's kind of where there's a project on there. When you get into the details of what you can and can't do, we can do anything. So it can go on a list, but right now it's restricted. So that would take actions to unrestrict it to do that sort of work.
So I do think that can you guys see that I shared the larger CIP, or is it still really tiny?
Pretty unreadable.
Okay, here, let
It's
me
nice to see.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So Steve was just talking about D3. So that's the old water tank site. But I still do think that because we have some others that don't have potential locations, that we could look at those that are listed as pocket parks.
And those are in the longer range
plan
too. That's the 2030 to 2034. So the second, that's the mid range time frame.
So the reason I would ask about it is just, I know that sometimes if something isn't on the plan, then it's not eligible for certain things. So I guess I know there was interest in that area of having a little pocket park. And if it's not on the plan, then I feel if there is a spot where there's kind of like miscellaneous pocket parks, that then it would apply.
It is right here on D12, sorry to interrupt, on D12 and D13. Do you see it says not shown on map?
Oh, okay.
And then it says neighborhood pocket and neighborhood pocket. So I would say that's where the flexibility is, Councilmember Neplin.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's where I saw something has.
So I look at the bottom of 2024, that's $72,240,000 expenditure this year for these things. What is, and we try to understand what's this telling me.
No, so that's telling you what the options are essentially for the time period. This will all not get built.
Right.
But the way a lot of funding works, that if you don't have a plan and it's not in your plan, then if an opportunity comes up, you can't get it. So it actually is beneficial to have a plan that drastically exceeds what we can accomplish within a time period, to provide flexibility for opportunities that arise.
Right. So my question is, understanding that to some degree, where are we this year? We're up and we're only at not even a month left in the year. And have gotten this funding starting with this, and then what happens with these things in the next year and the next year? Where is the funding coming from? We're trying to steer funding outside of the city, right?
Okay, so the one question I have, you said the $72.2 million back on slide 4. is the,
I'm just looking at the overall table.
sure, 75. All right, that is the 20-year plans project list, if you did everything at that list, right? So I think the earlier slides, like this was the community's request of the city through all these opportunities to hear them, put it together with our consultant team to put a list of projects together that the community spoke out about. How and if they all get on the list is why we're bringing it today as the start of the conversation of, do things stay, do things go, what is a higher priority, what isn't. That kind of talk will be coming, next few meetings. The CIP has to be built, so then we have a program, and then we have to develop the fee, and then we can move forward. Where we are looking to make sure we focus on is, of the $72 million in today's dollars, 66 million of that is in park eligible related projects. And these are eligibilities that are more in line with whole opportunities, unlike transportation, which is portioned out in 25, 50, 75, and 100%. These are now broken down, like you're going to build something, you're going to get a little bit of credit to do this. No, we have a deficiency. We're going to put that number in the numerator, divide it by the numerator and denominator, and get a new number, because it's development-based deficiencies in our system. So yes, it costs us money to build, but we are collecting the majority of that. So I can't tell you what our fee is going to be today, but it's likely to be a lot larger than it is currently for our park impact fee that we charge every development unit in town. So I think, don't be concerned right now with the burden of the city buying all that, because will be funded by this slide 4, majority through growth. That makes sense.
No.
I would also add, and I didn't say this in my presentation, so I apologize, is, one of the reasons why we take approach where we create a 20-year CIP, but break it up into pieces, say a really amazing opportunity comes up and there's something in the latter third phase and we're able to get a grant, there's a partnership, like you can move things around as well within your CIP. So if something that was in phase 3 and like say in 2 years, somehow a grant or something drops into our lap, we might be able to do something out of that phase or even in the second phase. And that's one of the reasons why we do a more holistic park impact fee as well, where we look at all 3 phases as a 20-year program at one time. Some cities do break it up into smaller chunks, but we have been pretty much standardized where we want to look at all of it at one time.
Can you flip back to slide 4, Laura, please?
Okay, I have to stop the share, so give me just a second. Yes, I will. Give me just a second. I mean, at least everything's working. There you go. Can you see slide?
There you go.
Slide 4? Okay.
Yep. So of the $72 million on the list, 66 million of that is attributable to development. So development's going to pay that share over time for these improvements, because the deficiencies in what we've adopted for levels of services are such that the red numbers are what we are deficient in our city systems, in neighborhood and community parks. We currently don't have deficiencies in trails. So that's the one. Call it positive, call it negative, depending on your look at it. But that is the one thing we do have. So the need for those improvements then is deficient by the standard. So when development comes in, they will contribute that was a good one. A share of the cost when we adopt a new development related fee.
A lot
of windows open.
Into the weeds, but do we still have, oh yeah, we do. But I was just curious with some of the trails specifically, I was looking at the best guess, and that's just to represent that some kind of trail. Unless there's a utility there that has a clear path that I don't know about, like a pipeline or a power line trail or something like that. But I was just interested in T7 mostly, and if that was just aspirational and we don't know what it'll look like. Where's that right?
I would say very aspirational with the opportunity to try to get it in that alignment. Trying to put them on property lines gives us flexibility with two neighbors. One says yes, one says no. Trails can meander. One says yes, then we split the difference, so it's less impactful. They do kind of align with some of our other corridors, but yeah, it's the best guess at the time, and it's a big fat line, so it can be big and flexible.
Great, that's what I'm really excited about someday too, so I just was curious how that would, but that explained it really well.
Yeah, there is a trail on half of that through the school property across from the high school already. Like, it's an old driveway, but so we did try to make. That's why you see that alignment is fairly bendy and kind of wiggly, because it's literally on an existing pathway. So try to make reasonable assumptions when we and our consultants kind of put these things together.
Councilman Mercer?
Yeah, so sort of, there was a question about one of the projects and then just how you classify them in terms of the buckets. I know one of the things we talked about early in the process, and there's been a lot of iterations of this list, was additional investments in Taylor's Landing. I know there were investments already made around power infrastructure, but I think one of the things we talked a little bit about, council, was something more comparable to what Carnation has in terms of a larger outbuilding with some storage, so that it wouldn't necessarily just be summer farmers market events. You could have music, you could have cooking, you could have various things with some storage. I think there is a line item in terms of R2 re-roof or replace shelter. Obviously, that's more than a, like, what classifies a renovation repair versus a development expansion project in terms of, because that is a different scale or magnitude about what's there, and then just how that ask is captured within the capital improvement plan.
So that is, and I think we lost Laura. So bear with me. I know Naomi is on there if we need someone to bunt for me, but I haven't been as in-depth involved in this as Laura and Larissa. But as far as the renovation repair, so the kind of darker blue section, existing structure we own and operate now, it can be repaired as is or completely kind of replaced in the footprint that it's sitting at. They didn't get into permitting, but again, anything in the floodway is going to be significantly difficult to actually permit for an additional structure. Not impossible or improbable, but harder, especially in the actual.
It's hard just,
flood
we don't have another place
plain.
to put it.
Right.
Ideally, it'd be more centrally located, but obviously that's not sort of something that we're planning for without additional park investment. So
Yeah.
that I just wanted to clarify the renovation. So that is sort of within the existing footprint. Anything more than that would either, or in even a different location, would be a new project or a new classification. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilmember Isaacson.
I think, I don't know, she's not here anymore, but.
Oh, she's back.
She might be back.
Sorry.
I'm
guess-
back. Sorry, I'm like having issues here, so I'm gonna just go off audio and video unless you have a question, okay?
There is a question currently, so you can listen up.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I think my question may go, one that asked directly aloud, I don't think I understood what it's not too late. So looking at the table. And I see 2024, 72,240,000. Are we saying that the very bottom of that table, $72,240,000, is that in 2024, what we estimate the cost, everything will cost us to do over the next 20 years? And if that is true, my next question is, why is it so much more expensive when I look over here, the very bottom right of the totals showing 111 million?
I'm looking at the image, sorry.
So the 2024 is what we estimate in 2024 dollars.
Yes.
However, we did add an inflator of I don't have it in front of me, 3.75%.
Yep.
Over the course of that time, because we know these projects will inflate over a 20-30 year period.
Okay.
Does that?
I think that's true.
Okay.
So the 72, sorry, yes, good question. Better asked. 72 on the slide is 111 over time. And the two numbers at the bottom is the 75.2 at the far bottom right of the actual CIP table is the mid and long range tally of that amount. So the delta is then the current 6-year proposal. So And it's super hard to put that table on here, so yeah, sorry. At least you can see most of it on your screens. Yeah.
The whole thing.
But yeah, there is an escalator built into the total cost.
Questions for Director Thomas? Okay,
Public hearing number one.
what was it?
Public hearing number one.
Yes, so we will move into our first public hearing this evening. First one is on our school impact fee. So I'll read the rules in once for both the public hearings, and we'll open and close them separately. In adherence to the regulations outlined for public hearings before the Duval City Council, Chapter 9 of the City Council Procedures Manual, any individual seeking to address the council during the designated public comment segment must comply with the following procedures. First, sign in on the provided form specific to the public hearing, and second, thoroughly complete all pertinent sections of the said form. Upon commencement of the hearing, as announced by the chair, typically the mayor, the city clerk will present the chair with the sign-in sheet. Subsequently, the chair will proceed with the agenda for the public hearing. Each speaker will be summoned to the podium in the order listed on the sign-in form, where they must communicate their name and, if relevant, their address and affiliation with any organization or group being represented, and their corresponding role or position within said organization or group. Time limits for speaking engagements are 3 minutes for individuals representing themselves and 5 minutes for those representing a group or organization, unless otherwise determined by majority vote of the council present. The city clerk will monitor and enforce these time limits, setting a timer for each speaker. Comments should be pertinent to the subject matter of the public hearing and respectfully addressed to the city council, with personal remarks being deemed inappropriate. Disorderly conduct, including disruptive behavior such as booing or harassment, will not be tolerated and may result in removal from the premises. Speakers may alternatively submit written requests or written statements, which will be added to the official record by the city clerk. Questions posed during the hearing will not be answered immediately, but may be addressed at the chair's discretion following the close of the comment period. Copies of city council and public hearing procedures will be available upon request and distributed to attendees at the outset of each public hearing session conducted by the Duval City Council. And with that, I will open the public hearing on school impact fees. Director Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor and council members of our community. So this is something that we do every year about this time of year, is we go through a public hearing process to adopt the school district's capital facilities plan into our comp plan and also adopt their school impact fee for the 2025 year. There honestly weren't a ton of changes within the school district, at least as far as student enrollment. So to give everybody kind of a primer, the city entered into an interlocal agreement with the district many years ago, and we still have that interlocal agreement today. In general, the district encompasses about 250 square miles. It includes Carnation, Duval, and unincorporated King County. It serves approximately 3,000 students. It's really been only fluctuating by about 20 or 30 students for the last couple of years. And even looking forward, they don't have a large projection of increased enrollment. The district includes 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school, and 3 alternative programs and a K-12 alternative parent partnership program. The district estimates that the population will remain about the same. The growth is about 134 students at the end of their planning period. They do have some projected improvements. So they are looking at rebuilding Tolt Middle School, and this is a school impact fee funded project. They're also looking at some major facility maintenance, technology security upgrades, and also portable classrooms. And those portable classrooms are also school impact fee eligible. The proposed fee for, oh my goodness, that is a typo. It should say 2025, and Oscar told me that. So thank you, Oscar. And I forgot to change it in my presentation. That should say 2025 proposed impact fees. The impact fee is decreasing for both the single family and multifamily rate from 2024 to 2025. So you can see we will look at $8,622 in 2025 for a single family home and $615 for a multifamily home. So you can see it's a decrease of about $5,200 for a single family and about $9,200 for a multifamily. We will retain the 25% discount rate. The estimated revenue that we will collect on behalf of the school district is about $551,000. And the administrative fee that we'll collect is about $4,100. And so this evening, you're holding your public hearing. When the council's ready, we'll approve the resolution, which will approve and adopt the capital facilities plan and incorporate it into our comp plan. And we'll also approve their school impact fee for 2025. Thank you. I've completed my presentation.
City Administrator, do we have anyone on the public hearing sheet?
We do not for the school impact fee. Still correct?
All right, if there's no one that would like to testify, I will now close the hearing. And we'll move on to the Parks, Trails and Open Space public hearing, Director Thomas.
Give me just a second. I'm having an issue, but Naomi will, our senior planner, will be doing this presentation.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. This is going to be short because I'm having trouble with power too. So let's get started. So this is going to be just an update to the previous presentation that I did for the public hearing for City Council on November 5th. So it's just a few things. At the last meeting, we asked to keep the hearing open, the record open, because there were still some changes going on. So I'm going to tell you what those are. Those changes primarily are reflected in Chapter 8. If you hearken back a few seconds ago to the presentation that Laura gave and that Steve was answering questions on, you were looking at one particular slide that was multicolored, and it was a large spreadsheet that showed all of the different projected costs and improvements. Well, in Chapter 8, there's maps that show the locations of those proposed items. Because that was being edited, and because of the changes with Doherty Farms, that changed the numbers. That also changes what the map looks like. So that's it. Those were the changes that occurred. So the first change is based on the CIP that you were looking at earlier. In the map, it reflects the older numbers, so it's not accurate. So on page 77, map 18 will be updated to reflect the new numbers that they talked about tonight. We're also going to go through it and do a final verification. We don't want maps in there that have different symbols that don't align with what's showing on the CIP. So now it's just down to some of the details, just cross-checking the numbers. The other change that you will see is on the next page, which is page 78 right now. It's map 19. Same thing, making sure that all of the different indicators for the trails are also accurate. You already talked about it earlier. There's a new cost for the CIP. The new cost estimate is $72.2 million. And that is all. Nothing else is changing. So the recommendation would be to close the public hearing record that was kept open on November 5th. The last thing that I want to say before I stop is that I wanted to give you a running total. We received 5 comments. 5 different people spoke at the hearing on November 5th. And then we had 7 people speak at the Planning Commission public hearing, and some of those were the same people. But just as an estimate, we also received 9 different emails and 3 written letters. So a total, technically, some of the people were the same people, but technically for a total of 24 comments that we received for this public hearing. And again, I recommend that the public hearing record be closed, and the next steps will be that I summarize that information, and it will be a new exhibit when we come back to you again, hopefully for adoption.
We actually do have 2 individuals here for public comment this evening.
The first is Jennifer Martin. You will have 3 minutes to speak.
Jennifer Martin, my address is 15230 Third Avenue. I'm a mother of 3 and a friend of many mountain bikers, outdoor enthusiasts and walkers. My kids like to fling themselves in the air and then land back on the dirt. I prefer to walk alongside them. I've come to the open houses and the Earth Day event and heard so many people talking about how we need more multi-use trails to have more access and more connectivity through town. And I just want to say I'm excited to see energy continue for turning the Duval open space into a multi-use trail. I think this is one of the most accessible projects you have right now because there's so much community investment and excitement, and it started in 2021, even unofficially, and it's continuing now. There's also some of the best opportunities for partnership with groups like the Cedar Crest M2B Club, which is from 6th grade to 12th grade and has many coaches and many families involved. There's also interest in Boy Scouts helping and working with groups like Evergreen Mountain Bike Club, who can help with things like MOUs and maybe permitting and figuring out design, maintenance, all of that. And there's already so many people who are involved in volunteering to maintain these trails, which is not true for most other trails. You don't see people out here maintaining the other trails the way that the mountain bike community especially does across Washington State. It's just an incredible way to also utilize that space because it is so steep and we know there's some wet areas down there. You're not going to go down and probably build like a basketball court right now. That's not the place for it. While also preserving the beauty and keeping it a quiet area that's respectful of all the neighbors and communities that are there, because there's some very wonderful neighborhoods down there. It's also just a sustainable project, which is hard to find, and it's gonna be one of the more affordable ones you have. So we would love to see this work continue and this excitement continue to grow to move towards this, especially because you guys are making these long, up to 20-year plans, but I would love to see my kids be able to utilize this while they're still kids and before they are the voting citizens paying the taxes too. And again, it should be maintained long-term, so then their children's children could play here too. So thank you so much, and we hope to see the excitement continue for using the Duval open space for a multi-use trail.
Thank you. Thank you. And our next person is David Andrews.
I'm actually here on behalf of the Washington Student Cycling League and the Cedar Crest Mountain Bike team as well. I'm a coach on the mountain bike team, and I'm a programs committee member on the statewide Washington Student Cycling League. And I'll just come back to that wonderful slide 4 that we're all spending so much time on. The big colorful table in line T2 is the Duval Open Spaces Trail that looks like it comes in about 1.5 million. We'll also note in the notes section, it says this list does not include volunteer time. So I'm here to save you money. I actually want to tell you about Evergreen Mountain Bike. I'm not on the Evergreen Mountain Bike committee, but I am a member and I've been supporting it for a long time. And their goal is to support a cooperative relationship between mountain bikers and landowners and regulatory bodies like yourselves. And the whole point of that was the old way of mountain biking was to build a trail, ride it, and when someone tried to shut you down, lobby to get it not shut down. And Evergreen came in and said, no, that's backwards. We want to go in proactively, build relationships, build trails that will be long-term sustainable. And that brings us to tonight. This is the perfect time to partner with Evergreen because Evergreen brings expertise in volunteers. So expertise in permitting, trail design that will last, and volunteers that will build the trails like myself for free. So my ask is we allocate budget in the short-term portion, moving that T2, at least a portion of the planning into short-term budget, specifically for staff time to work with Evergreen on things like permitting and signage. I'll tell you part of my volunteer time was riding the periphery of the Duval open spaces and trying to find a way to get in there. It's almost impossible. And if you don't have a GPS and know that you're walking into city-owned space, you don't feel welcome necessarily because you're not sure where am I at. So by a little bit of signage and preparation, this also helps on some of the other goals, including acquisition. Goal number 2 of the PTOS is acquisition. You already have the space. The problem is it's not used. So a little bit of access, partnership with Evergreen, and all of a sudden you bring in approximately 80 acres of space into use. I also want to talk about goal number 1, inclusion and accessibility, and this one's a little more personal to me. I am the father of a trans child, someone who said that they would never engage in an organized sport. We had tears over locker rooms in high school and a bunch of issues, but when it came to mountain biking, he rode his first race, I think, a month ago. And that was thanks to the inclusive nature of mountain biking, the inclusive community that's built up around there. And I've never seen anything like it. I've coached about 5 different sports, and mountain biking is one of the most inclusive, and it's for every kid. It's not just for the 3 kids who are really good and everybody else gets to come along for the ride. So it definitely supports goal number 1. We talked about acquisition. Goal number 3 is design, develop, and maintain. I mentioned how it's going to be very easy on your budget if you can partner with Evergreen. Goal number 4 is protect and preserve sensitive areas. The Duval open space is very steep. Trying to utilize that space in a reasonable manner is difficult. Mountain bike trails are one of the few places that can actually work in a sensitive area like that. And Evergreen has a lot of practice partnering with both regulatory entities like Washington Fish and Wildlife, and also the tribes. They recently did a project in North Bend where they partnered extensively with the tribes to do all of the naming and all of the cultural markers that are included within the trail system. Develop integrated trails. If you look on the map, it's kind of self-explanatory. It hooks up a bunch of stuff that looks like it's going to happen. And 7 is management and administration. And I'll say you have a statewide expert in doing this type of recreation, and partnering with Evergreen will really lower your burden on this type of activity, and you can concentrate on other things that are more complicated. So I just want to close by saying, you know, we have a very straightforward ask. Please move some budget, which includes probably primarily staff time, into the short-term plan so that we can get started right away. Next summer, there's windows open for grants. If we had a plan in place.
You have 30 seconds.
Then we would be eligible to apply for those grants. Most of them close October 31st, so we missed the window now, but we're in perfect position for next summer. And we have a host of student leadership who would love to help write those grants and seek funding from people like the International Mountain Biking Association for trail building. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to provide public comment on this evening? Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. All right, we'll move on to existing business. First up is Agenda Bill 24-64, adoption of the 2025-2026 preliminary budget for discussion and or decision. And we'll start with our finance director, Beth McMinn, and our city administrator, Cynthia McNabb.
It's his first budget.
First presentation. Me there. Just shut my other windows so he sees my work. 1 second, let me full screen. And I have to share it, I'm pretty sure. John, you can't see that, can you? And I lost the people.
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay,
I can try on my end if you'd like.
I'll get there.
Okay.
We lost
And-
our screen due to power outages and rotten batteries inside of the remote. So.
And I'm sorry for speaking without my camera on. I lost power, so.
Okay, can you see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Just a quick presentation of our 25-26 annual budget. You go to the next slide. This is just recapping our journey for our 25-26 biennial budget. So budget modification. So these are changes to the budget since we last spoke on November 5th. So we have city administrative training at $90,000, which has been added to the general fund executive department budget. We have 2 economic development projects at $10,000 each that will be funded by strategic funds. Our public records administrator step increase was added for $8,000. That's the general fund police department. And storm operating funds are set to be transferred to our storm CIP fund to ensure our required reserve in that fund, and that's $271,925. So those are modifications. So this is just an overview revenue summary of some actual and our proposed 25-26 budget.
I think the things to note here are some of the changes. When you're looking at our intergovernmental line, those are our grants, and I think we do have some grants. Projected for 25, but in 26, that revenue is down. We also have some changes in our transfers. And those are mainly funds that are transferred from, our operating funds into our, capital project funds to capital manage, our capital projects. Because when you look at what's left, we are maintaining the levels of our 23-24 revenue to a certain extent. Of course, we need to realize that our property or our levy lift is ending at the end of 25, and you can see that decrease reflected in our tax revenue for 26. We can go to the next slide. Our expenditure summary. Again, the biggest changes in the 25-26 budget are our transfers. Again, most of those transfers represent funding for our capital improvement projects. We do see changes in capital funding, but this budget was built to be focused and address our needs in the coming year. So this is just a general fund summary of our revenue expenditures. This is our fund of focus for the most part. And so again, when you look at our 23-24 actuals and compare those to our 25 and 25 projected, they're very much within comparison, other than the transfers, and the 23-24 transfers represent funds that were transferred in from our strategic fund and our ARPA fund to process expense to the general fund. We are no longer doing that in 25-26. We are directly expensing to those funds. So you can see that reduction in the transfers. And then this is just the overview, which yes is very tiny to see, but just represents the changes, our projected 23-24, our 25-26 projected. So you can see the change in the ending fund balances and the changes for the 25-26 budget to our ending fund balances. And next steps will just be discussion and decision.
I do, yeah. We have a presentation, or I have a presentation, which when we close this out, I can share my screen because I have it easily. Okay. So the next part of the budget process that we discussed at the last meeting was to collect any budget amendments so that we could go through any amendments to the budget for council to consider. And so I received a couple, I put them in this slide deck. We also had a question that was answered today by council. We also have by our city attorney. We have a finance director response as well. So just wanted to go through the few budget amendments and questions that we also got before council deliberates. So the first budget amendment, you'll recall the last meeting, I put it in here so that even though Councilmember Schaefer isn't here, I considered it a request for an amendment that was made. So I wanted to make sure that we honored his request even though he wasn't here. So he proposed $300,000 to be placed in economic development to support economic development activities.
Staff took a look at this request, and where I could, I just provided some quick responses for council to consider. So the last biennium, we had 250,000 budgeted towards economic development activities without real plans in place to spend. So a fair amount of time from city administration went into trying to source ideas and manage that program. It did offer some real innovative ways for groups to get an infusion of resources into those activities. Though I would say many groups struggled with identifying other sources of funding and volunteers for their ideas other than the grant awards that were given through the economic development and tourism. But you heard from a lot of those groups last week, and so this is on the table for council to consider. Because right now, the only thing in the economic development and tourism grant funding line is the line item for the Port of Seattle match. And in terms of staff responses, I would say it would be helpful to have council direction from the economic development subcommittee prior to tying up those funds, and give us an idea of what you would like us to spend money on, as opposed to putting a bunch of money in and then having city administration try to source ideas. It would be better for us to have some direction, and this could be done through the budget. Yeah, thank you. Budget amendment process. So again, once you pass a budget, you can amend a budget. That might be a more effective mechanism for putting money away for economic development, but just wanted to offer our thoughts. Happy to take direction any way council wants to go in terms of funding that line item in the budget. The next request that we got was from Councilmember Naplin. We heard testimony today relevant to this request, which was $5,000 towards signage and permit fees to negotiate a MOU to create a partnership with the Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance. Let me see if I can move a little people in mine so I can see all the words on the slides. And the Cedar Crest Mountain Bike Club for design, construction, and maintenance of an initial phase of trails and develop open space, along with the way the project is supported in the goals and the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Plan. City staff took a look. Today we did some roundtable discussions. So we do have a GPS map that was marked by an intern that the mountain bike community had identified using topography. We do have a route trail map, so some work has been done. We identified that this would require community process as the map for the proposed trail system abuts the backyards of Taylor's Ridge, Legacy Ridge, and North Hill. So this will require some staff time to do outreach to those communities and make sure that we're doing, good communication with them. Staff time is in short supply, so I just wanted to highlight that. This will trigger SEPA and permits, so there will be a certain amount of work that will have to be done with community development to do the trail building part. It is likely that we're going to need an arborist and environmental consultant. This would likely exceed the $5,000 in the proposed amendment to the budget. So just thinking about what that might cost. We do need time to effectively and respectfully consult with tribal partners for this project. And there is a potential opportunity for grant funding with Councilmember Perry from King County, which I discussed with her at last night's call. So that's that one. Amendment number 2, summer stage from Councilmember Naplin. Summer stage funding will remain at the 23-24 spending level unless additional sponsorship above the 24-25 baseline is required to cover the full additional costs. As you may recall, I think we started this in the initial budget in September 17th, that we put additional money in the summer stage line item for the 25th anniversary celebration, which is next year for summer stage. So the staff response on that is 2024 was the first year that city administrative staff handled sponsorships for summer stage. So lots of learning in the first year that we took it over. We do have plans to seek sponsorships a little more broadly than has been done in the past. We did secure our first corporate sponsor for Light Up Duval, which I shared at the last council meeting. I also shared last meeting, we do have a new sponsorship brochure that has a bunch of information that is currently in draft.
we can finalize that draft and begin seeking sponsorship opportunities as soon as the budget passes and we know what events we're going to have. So we have to wait till the budget passes to be able to offer sponsorship opportunities to businesses in the community. I will say this is trying to fund the 25th anniversary with sponsorships will be difficult because we have to start planning summer stage yesterday. So the agents have already reached out to us to book bands and we're a little behind in booking it. So it would be very difficult to try to get sponsorships for something that's 8 months out, a little more realistic if we knew what we were trying to get sponsorships for. So it's a little bit of a timing concern. Okay, next is a staffing budget amendment. So unless and until sufficient ongoing funding is secured, following staffing changes, including the budget, included in the budget will be adjusted as follows. I think the request was for a budget note. So staff response, so the emergency management coordinator, the request was that it would remain as an LTE throughout the budget cycle or the biennial budget cycle. So the idea of carrying over LTEs indefinitely, after talking to staff that had been here on prior budgets, this has been proposed in prior budgets. The prior city attorney at the time cautioned that this was likely illegal as it constitutes a misrepresentation and breach of contract. I also can't find any other public institutions that would allow a continuous term limited position to be held over indefinitely. Also a little worried about misclassification of the position or the employee. We can open a new LTE. So what would be involved in this is we would have to, for the emergency management coordinator, end the position in 2025 and then reappropriate and set a new term for the new LTE in order for it to be legal. So you can have a new LTE, but you would have to effectively terminate the employee, terminate the position, set a new term, and reappropriate the money for it. The employee would have a break in service. We do have some concerns around morale and potentially losing that employee in that process. Same response for the community events coordinator. The challenge with the community events coordinator is a little more attenuated because that position ends in May of 2025, which is right before summer stage, Duval Days, summer camps, summer programming. So if the community events coordinator does not want to go through that process of ending the LTE, reopening it, we're terminating that position right when we need it most. So that's a concern. New project manager, engineering C would not be advertised or filled. The staff notes on this is it's proposed to be fully funded by the utilities, both operations and capital accounts. As we work through the math on this, the engineering changes to project manager positions, we did the roll up, and even with the new ad, the 2-year collective average for 25 and 26 for those positions actually is less than the average for the engineering services in the 23-24 budget. We've included a chart here for that. I don't know, Director Lynch, if you want to say anything more on that.
Looks good.
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 New custodian will not be advertised or filled. So this position request, we believe, is supported by the Moss Adams report. In that report, the Public Works team was identified as frequently working on tasks not in their job description, causing overwork. This position would allow Public Works to discontinue performing custodial and facilities tasks that are not in their body of work. We also estimate that the cost of contracting out facility cleaning will exceed the cost of an in-house custodial employee. The city buildings also, as a user of our custodial services, need a more, and I see Finance Director McMinn shaking her head, need a more direct and continuous custodial presence that we would get by having in-house that we currently receive. We currently have it every other week. We need more cleaning. We have a mice problem again in PD as of last week. So having more cleaning services, I think, would help with that. New police sergeant, the third sergeant will not be advertised or filled, so, city response. Our perspective is it's needed immediately. This was verified by an outside agency that performed a mini audit of the PD, as well as advice from our current chief of police. We only proposed it to be delayed into 2026 while city council considered funding mechanisms for the PD in 2025. Given the tenure of our new officer hires, having fuller sergeant coverage will dramatically reduce risk in the city and allow for needed mentorship and training of officers just starting their careers. And then lack of continuous supervision has led to morale and lack of supervision issues in the PD. And this budget request, we hope, would work to solve those issues. New finance manager will be issued as an LPE and or only part-time. This position in our mind is supported by the independent assessment of Moss Adams, as well as an internal review that I did in the summer of 2023 as we were doing the finance director recruitment. That clearly identified that the Duval finance team was understaffed compared to peers, especially given the lack of HR in the city. We again did a similar calculation as we did with the engineering position or the project manager position that is being reviewed. So we actually, when we reallocated, and it made sense because a lot of our finance staff, the majority of their activities are actually associated with supporting the utilities. Even with the new finance manager position, we're proposing to decrease overall cost of the general fund while adding in FTE by reallocating the staffing allocations more towards the utility funds than to the general fund. And then we had a legal question regarding the fact that in order to meet our reserve requirements, we added the contingency fund balances, strategic fund and general reserve balances to meet the overall general fund. This slide captures the request for a legal review of that question. I also had Director McMinn look at that question. So the finance director response is per prior request from council when we came to council to spend the contingency funds on IT, emergent IT issues. Council had included an ask for us to put money back from the contingency fund or from the general fund into the contingency fund to make sure that the contingency fund was made whole after we drew it down for those IT purchases. So that's in the budget that we make that transfer back into the contingency fund. If we're not looking at combined totals to cover reserve of general contingency and strategic to meet the policy reserve, it would actually be prudent not to process that 150,000 transfer back from the general fund to the contingency fund. Because what we essentially be saying is that the general fund isn't healthy enough to make that transfer. By not processing that planned transfer, the general fund would actually go back to meeting the proposed balance or reserve fund balance that's by policy. And then city attorney responded today and found from a legal perspective, the proposed budget meets the requirements of state law. And with that, between Director McMinn and I, we're happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council on this? Go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, it seems like budget amendment 3 should be broken up into like budget amendment 3.1, 3.2, 2.3. Are we going to vote for each one of those or?
Only if there's a motion in a second. It's up to council on whether you want to discuss these or have a motion to approve the budget as is. It is all in your prerogative. Of note though, those questions, the plethora of questions did not come in until yesterday. And the council had agreed that all budget questions and amendments come in by the 13th. Councilmember Kupo, Isaac Senate, and then now.
Given that it has been stated clearly in every council meeting for the last 2 months that any budget things need to be in by the Thursday after the meeting that we have on Tuesday, I find that an egregious usage of waiting until the last minute to submit this. And I just think it's pointless. I don't think we should do any of it. Except maybe a line item to work with the mountain bike stuff.
So, completely agree that, you know, we're gonna always shoot to get our questions in the Thursday after. So with all that being said, I would like to, so that, yeah, we should try to approve it today, let's let everyone process each question and understand what it means. I don't think some of them couldn't be amended, we add notes to the budget to say, this is how we like it, isn't that in my previous, it doesn't have to be amended, we add a note to the budget. I think you even mentioned that you thought they were intended to be notes, not amendments, is that right?
There can, however, I would note that, the city administrator and staff have significant work to do on the budget, and it's been well known for well over a month that the intent was to approve the budget this evening. So that really puts staff in a really bad position, as far as getting policy work done and the items that have to get done for the beginning of the year. So, the council can do what it wants, what it chooses, however, this has been the ongoing discussion for quite a lengthy time. And you can do what you want, but you have to have a first and second to.
I agree. Well, just for clarity, what I'm saying is a note is not, is the path to less work on staff.
No,
We got to know today's the budget. I know you gotta type about this less intensive than again.
not necessarily, because the budget note has restrictions. And so there's a lot of work that goes along with being able to move forward after a budget note has been developed. So it's almost equivalent. Councilmember Acklin?
Yeah, I just want to explain why this came in when it did. So during the last meeting was the first I was able to see a lot of the documents that had it to the level of detail that you could even see it at a department level or see the allocations, how they changed over time. That was the first I saw it, was actually during the meeting 2 weeks ago. Then we got the municipal financial plan, which shows a very dire situation, very dire. I mean, we're at $1.25 million deficit in the second year of this budget that we're approving in the general fund. And that was the first I'd seen all of this information of I don't even see a plan forward that we can close that gap and accomplish any of the capital plans that we have been working on, which would be, you know, City Hall. We're being asked to do, we're in the middle of site selection. We fully designed Third Avenue and we have no money to do it. We, you know, have Big Rock Ball Field going out, being designed. We don't have prospects to build that. And when I look at the capital or the municipal financial plan, I really see a dire situation that unless the community approves a levy for operations, that isn't even a levy that would allow us to build any of these things. So that would just be to fill the gap for operations. We'd also have a 2.2% sales tax increase, plus there was one other thing to close the gap. I'm trying to remember what it was. We didn't go over it because apparently they weren't available due to an illness, which is understandable, but that's why this came in when it did. I've only had that very short amount of time to review any of the details of what is happening with this budget, and I submitted it as soon as I can. And a lot of it really is in response to seeing that municipal financial plan and really seeing that we have a very difficult path forward. And I know that reductions in staff are extremely difficult on morale. So why would we hire, you know, six or seven additional employees or convert LTEs into permanent positions when we have no money secured? And if we don't, we're reducing staff. I just feel extremely uncomfortable with that scenario. And so that's why I thought a budget note to just say, hey, let's pause. We have a lot of work next year to, you know, if this council agrees that we should ask the community for more money, then if the community says yes, then we hire these people. If they say no, that's a message that we need to readjust our priorities. You know, that's where this is coming from. And the reason that the bicycle group came in when it did is because they presented at our very last meeting. I wanted to meet with them and hear them out. I saw it in the capital plan that that open space development into Paz was scheduled to happen in 2027, which requires some of the planning to happen in this biennium. And so I thought this was a perfect opportunity to bring it in. So that's why it came when it did, because the opportunity presented itself really kind of at the last minute. I didn't know there was a big group ready to go on something like this. And, you know, you strike when the iron's hot. You have a very excited group of people, enthusiastic. They even have insurance to cover their volunteers. Like it's just an amazing opportunity. So that's what the timing is. And I feel like there's an energy that there was some type of disrespect in me bringing this when I am bringing it. And so I just wanted to explain that I mean no disrespect. I am going through this as I'm seeing the information. And that's when we got the municipal financial plan. I just saw it for the first time on Thursday night or Friday. And so that's, I'm doing the best I can.
So for me, what would be helpful? I don't know what the plan was to go through. I mean, for me, and I don't know about the rest of council, if we went back to the beginning of the slide deck and got some kind of, or if you were just expecting to have council discussion overall and a motion if people wanted to make amendments, or how, because I have a sense that there would be a pretty quick go through of.
Yeah, well, I would suggest, because there's a whole bunch, and if we go one by one, that if the majority of council doesn't want to discuss them at this stage, this late stage, that if council, we take a show of hands, does council want to discuss these one by one? If the answer is yes, we discuss them one by one. If not, we ask for a motion to approve the budget. That's the most simple way to do it. So, but we haven't heard from Councilmember Mercer or Councilmember Supple.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was trying to stick to the one responsible, and there's obviously multiple things here, so I can just sort of do a straw poll response in terms of, at a high level, you know, I have some reservations about allocating the economic development funds for a number of reasons. One is I didn't actually think there's a lot of value in terms of investing in the community. I wouldn't classify a lot of that as economic development, because I didn't necessarily see attributed ROI back to the businesses, or how that, you know, turned into, which is ultimately grow the downtown community to grow the city's revenue, and that correlation for me is very soft currently. So I'd much rather approach that as a amendment, or you know, further down the road. I am positively inclined toward the mountain biking. Again, I think it is appropriately potentially scoped. There is obviously some other expertise, and even as good as the public comment was, you know, fully articulating what is available that we could leverage that would take weight off the staff. So I'd like to revisit that, but again, I don't think we're ready to allocate a specific bucket of money tonight. On the staffing, I fully am cognizant of Councilmember Naplin's point of view, and I think we're all struggling with that. All cities in the state are struggling with that. I think we heard actually at the last council meeting that it's not really these six, it's like, you know, more broadly the city administrator's position, others, and even taking that off will not necessarily solve that problem. There's a bigger thing that we're gonna need to approach there. Having worked in a space where we leverage vendors regularly and have that break, there are problems with that methodology beyond, I think, some of the legal exposure, but I think in terms of, you know, you're in an LTE, you're going to be more likely to look for a job outside that's going to offer a secure position. I'd much rather leverage that expertise in the short term, and I think the folks in those roles are aware of the challenges municipalities across the state face. So I would also feel bad if we had to cut back, but I think, again, folks are going into that kind of eyes wide open. And then lastly, I'll close is I'm not sort of in favor of the reclassification at this time. And then the last piece is just, you know, from Director Mimin's previous comments, but more broadly, I think sort of circling back on, there's a lot of work to be done. I think we also need those positions, because not having them, or even if we lost them because of classification, it sets the city further behind. So again, that's sort of, I want to be transparent in terms of, I'm very aware, and I think we all are, of approaching fiscal cliff. But I also don't think that some of these modifications or amendments directly address the problem at the scope that needs to be addressed. So that was a lot, but hopefully that sort of makes my or perspective now.
Thank you, Councilmember Mercer. Councilmember Sutton.
Well, at the risk of repeating a lot of what Ron has just said, I'm not really in favor of going through each amendment and voting on it. I'm pretty much satisfied with the budget, the way it's presented.
Councilmember Rico.
I'm in agreement on this awful one, Marcia. I agree.
All right, go ahead, Councilmember Isaacson. Well, we've got a majority that do not want to go through the amendments, so there really isn't much point in discussing them further. If council chooses as a body to, but the next step would most appropriately be a motion on the project.
One question for you.
Go ahead.
The discussion has been after Councilwoman Applin and then Jen, that everyone had a chance to say something. And I had a chance to say
Go ahead.
after that. You're negating.
No, I'm just letting you know that I'm not negating. I'm just saying that we have a majority that have said that they don't want to discuss the amendments. You're welcome to speak, but most appropriate is usually just going straight to the vote, but it's up to you.
I just don't appreciate being basically told, you shouldn't say anything.
No, I'm sorry, that's how you infer it. That was not the intention of trying to keep this meeting moving. Councilmember Applin?
I just, I understand the point about the mountain biking, that, we don't necessarily know exactly enough about the amount that would be required. My question would be, could we have some kind of note or acknowledgement that there will be movement towards having a conversation, trying to create an MOU and working through that, because I know the budget is sort of our work plan. And so if we don't establish that that is a priority and something that this council would like us to look at in the budget, it isn't necessarily part of the work plan. So I just it kind of fizzled out the last time and I was pretty sad. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity to engage with these groups, save us an enormous amount of money, potentially. They even have, the ability from Evergreen to help with the design, help with some of those things, have a lot of experience. So anyway, my ask would be whether or not we do an amendment or however we do it, I'm just wondering, can we get some kind of commitment that we will move forward on that?
Go ahead.
I don't think it requires a budget note, but certainly council can ask to put a budget note in and we would take that as direction. I will say that I had a fairly robust conversation with Councilmember Perry last night. And she has a few buckets of money that are very specific to activities, and one of them is recreation and open spaces. And so I knew about this and talked to her about whether or not this kind of activity would match that budget or that grant opportunity. She said she thought it would. So I have a commitment that I intend to apply for a grant for that. That I have already told a council member that I would be doing. I can commit to you that I am going to do that if it meets the match requirements. So you can choose to put a budget note in, but I will be doing that in January.
Would that also involve having conversations and potentially engaging with the group from the mountain bike clubs?
So that's operational and that probably wouldn't go in a budget note anyway. The mayor would direct me to engage in conversations. But I mean, there are a lot of stakeholders that would need to have a conversation as part of that. And yeah, I would include anybody who's a stakeholder in that discussion.
Go ahead.
Question. If the individual's not converted to FTE or not hired, would our budget still be negative in 2026? And by how much?
So you're talking like all the FTEs continuing as FTEs?
Now, if we did not convert the LTEs to FTE 6 position, I don't think it is hired and or converted to FTE, if that did not happen, would our budget still be negative and by how much?
So when you say budget, are you talking about focusing on the general fund, or are you talking about all funds? Because some of all funds, well, if you look at all funds, our ending balance is increasing in 2026.
So the ones that are negative, deal with the balance.
It would take a little bit more research because all those FTEs are not funded by a single fund. So the emergency coordinator FTE is funded by a majority of our utility funds as well as our building fund, small percentage on the general fund. Our community events coordinator would be the only one that's 100% on the general fund. So it would help to alleviate, but I would have to do further research to give you the exact impact.
Councilmember Supple, and then I'll ask for a motion.
Yeah, well, I would like to make a motion to approve Agenda Bill 2464, adopting ordinance 1333, which adopts the 2025-2026 biennial budget estimated expenditure.
Second, right, any further discussion? Councilmember Napoli?
I just want to make one comment. We have moved from averaging in the non-utility funds between like 26 to 28 employees, FTEs, and we're now at about 40. And so we have added a tremendous amount of staff, and we have a tremendous deficit. And I feel really uncomfortable going to the taxpayers in a few months or 6 months, whenever, and asking for additional funds in a sales tax and in a property tax increase, when we have increased our staffing by such a huge amount. I think everyone agrees that, you know, you do need to add staff as the city grows. That is an enormous amount of growth in such a short amount of time. We were at 28 employees in 2020, FTEs that are non-utility. The budget proposes 40 now. That's a huge increase in a very short amount of time. And I am not in support of approving this budget because I am not going to feel comfortable going to the taxpayers and asking for such a huge increase, both to taxes, sales tax, and property taxes, right after we just hired a bunch of people. Feels like a manufactured emergency. And I don't feel comfortable doing it. I think we should ask for the money, tell them the situation we're at, and find out if they're willing to support it. Instead of being, you know, presenting to them some kind of emergency situation that we're gonna have to lay people off. And then we'll have to say, well, yeah, we just hired them. It's a bad optic. So I can't support this budget. I really appreciate all the work that went into it. I think all the people that we have here at the city and the people that we intend to hire would do good work. So it's not that. It's just, yeah, I just feel very uncomfortable with it. So I just want to say that's why I will not be able to support this budget. But thank you for all of your hard work on this. You really did a tremendous job. So thank you.
Anything else? Councilmember Isaacson?
At what point do we interject a note request? Is it now or?
You would need to make a motion right now.
Okay, so I propose to make a amendment to add a note that generalize, we work on wording later, so we can vote on the abstraction rate, but in general, to not advertise, hire, or convert any LTs actually or new positions until we can identify a funding source that will cover them and not drive us into our plan.
Is there a second? Second. All right, discussion. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would just, in general, like, I appreciate where it's coming from, and I feel like I understand the reasoning. I think I disagree in the benefit, the outcome, and of like what it actually provides, given the alternative, knowing that changes are coming, and that it's a struggle for, you know, hiring people enough. I mean, let alone adding that LT. Like if I was looking for a job, I would of course go for an FTE over LTE, and so there's that element as well. And I think getting that funding, is something that we are going to work on and need to be successful at, but I think, having the FTE designation to me indicates a strong commitment to doing that and shows support to, this is a position we want to continue to have long-term because it is important to our community. But I'm saying, I understand where you're coming from and I hear that, and I just disagree in how we get to that, probably the same outcome, so.
Okay, anyone else? Councilmember Cooper. I understand where you're coming from too, but I also spent how much for the 4 parcels of land by Big Rock Ball Fields. I could have easily stood up and said, I feel this is a poor use of the taxpayers' money, and that would have made the budget, solid.
Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we're all sort of coming from, a place of good intent. I think one of the things I do want to sort of acknowledge though is that there was an internal discussion, and obviously some of the positions we had hired as part of ARPA were not continuing, so there was sort of some contraction. I think the other thing is there's both been operational changes, sort of acknowledging feedback from staff and particularly in the public workspace about creating a path for advancement and growth, which is reflected in some of the positions we have and the changes, because we obviously were losing staff. We were going through multiple hiring rounds. We were having to hire consultants, which also have associated costs. So there's a lot of costs at the periphery that are associated with keeping these positions, and then letting them go and rehiring can oftentimes be multiples more expensive than retaining the staff with that lost expertise. I think the other thing I would just want to call out is, and this is specifically the acknowledgement of the rate of growth, is there was also a contraction around COVID. So we went through a cycle. So it's not just really that we're going from this to this, it's that we went from this to this and we're kind of trying to right size it. It's not 100% on staff there, but again, it's another point, and I do think, this is a difficult conversation. I think there's a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers in doing the right thing. I think there's also costs associated or opportunity costs by short-term versus long-term that we also have to look at. And then again, there's a bigger problem that we're going to have to solve. And I agree 100% that there's going to be some tough conversations to have. The land acquisition, other things, a lot of that was secured through grant, but there was still some costs. So again, I'm not in favor specifically of the note, because I think it essentially becomes the plan for action versus we're not going to actually execute on that. But I do think we should, again, I want to acknowledge that the perspective that you both have in terms of looking out for the city, but also want to be able to deliver on the services, which is the other part that we need to do. So.
Councilmember Supple, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would just kind of fall on the side of delivering the services that the people that we all expect, and I think having FTEs is one way that we're going to do that. We're in the risk of not delivering on the services that we've promised as citizens without having those positions filled.
Thank you. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. Any abstentions? Motion passes. I'm sorry, motion does not pass. No, sorry. Obviously, the yours is safe by God. Thanks. So now we take a vote on the, unless there are no any more amendments, then we will take a vote on the underlying motion, which is approval of the 2025-2026 budget as presented. It's already been seconded because we voted on an amendment. So we'll do a roll call vote on this, and we'll have the clerk count the roll with the agenda.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
Aye.
Mr. Isaacson,
No.
Mr. Mercer,
Aye.
Mr. Supple,
Aye.
Ms. Napland,
No.
Ms. Schofield.
Uh,
Um,
Go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, please, after you.
We've got through it all, I think, since Councilmember Schaefer isn't here. So that the motion passes, the budget is approved. First of all, I want to thank all of our hardworking staff for the extreme efforts they put into this budget to look out for the best interests of our community, for what our community wants, what our legal responsibilities are, what our responsibilities are to our businesses and to our employees. I also want to thank council for robust discussion during this process. And I want to, just a personal note, when I took office in 2018, we had fewer employees at this city than when we had in 2008. Yet our city had grown 40% and taken on miles of infrastructure. It's taken 7 years to get to a point of an independent workload analysis, identifying only a few positions that we are without. And that we need to be successful as a community, which is huge progress. We have been discussing fiscal cliffs at the city for over 20 years, since before I was even an elected official. That fiscal cliff is coming to every city in Washington state. And it is something that has been discussed every year, and we'll continue to have that discussion until the decisions are made to determine whether or not the city is going to move forward and carry out our obligations to our community and to the laws that we are charged with upholding, or go a different pathway. It will be an ongoing discussion until we're provided with both the tools to provide raise revenue that works for our communities, or we have the voter authority to do so. It is a tough road. But one of the other things that we also heard this evening from our insurance company is not being properly staffed is a huge risk in of itself. Our goal between the staff and I is always to make sure that we are putting the core responsibilities of us as a city government first and foremost, and then putting the wants of our community second, so that when we have the opportunity to do those wants, that we're able to maintain our statutory obligations. That is at the very foundation of municipal government. And we do that, however, we have big challenges moving ahead. So this budget is challenging. This is that last budget that we've been warning about for years. Unless we have some sort of economic windfall, that these decisions are going to have to be made, but the can has been kicked for 20 years. And when the can is kicked for 20 years, it makes the decisions. Which is one of the reasons why many of you know that I bring a lot of those tough challenges forward, so that we don't kick the can and put it in the hands of others to have to make those challenging decisions, and that we have the guts to do it and help make sure that those challenges don't persist in the future. This is a solid budget, yet very difficult. So I want to thank everyone for all of the work and effort that went into it, all of the challenges that go into it. It is never an easy process. And we look forward to bringing forth opportunities for solutions in the coming biennium. So thank you all. And with that, we'll go into new business, Agenda Bill 24-65, adoption of the Riverview School District Impact Fee. Director Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we held our public hearing this evening for the school impact fee and for the capital facilities plan. We've provided an agenda bill and a resolution. And if council wants to, they can approve the agenda bill this evening. Thank you.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Moving on to Agenda Bill 24-66, Parks, Trails and Open Space Plan, for discussion, Director Thomas.
Good evening again. Naomi will be coming on in just a second if she can to talk to you about this. Is really the first official touch for the agenda bill. We've had a lot of discussion this evening about the CIP, and we also gave an update at the public hearing, but we also wanted to provide this time as an opportunity if you want to have any further discussion. Our plan is moving forward that we're going to make the final changes to our P2S plan to our figures and maps and get that wrapped up and take it to Planning Commission at their next meeting, and then City Council in its second and final meeting of 2024.
Thank you, Laura. I want to make sure you guys can hear me. I'm just worried about the connection. So the agenda bill, if you look at it, it's a summary of what we've done with the Parks, Trails and Open Space Plan, otherwise known as the PTOS. And we're at the very end of it. So what's going to happen next, if nobody has any comments, the next time that we will be presenting it, we'll have a summary of all the comments that we've received during the open record hearings. The actual comments that came in writing will be also attached as a new exhibit. So that's a change that you will see in the adoption packet if you go back and look in the final document. And so we'll go to Planning Commission. We're going to ask them to recommend adoption. That will take place on December 11th. And then on December 17th, we will offer it to City Council for adoption. And then from that point forward, it will be adopted. And then as we move forward with the comprehensive plan, the parks element in the comprehensive plan will then refer to this plan by reference. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, this is your last chance before we take it to the finish line.
Comments, questions? Councilmember.
Just more of a comment. I could have made this at the last meeting as well, but just sort of an appreciation of the work that staff has put into this. This project was obviously deferred for multiple years. You know, a lot of thought has gone into both the design and soliciting feedback from the community. So I realize there are a lot of things that have to line up in terms of funding and other pieces to actually fully execute it on it. But I did, again, just want to make that acknowledgement. Appreciate it, particularly Naomi, you and the other staff that have worked on this, that it's really has come together nicely. So appreciate the work.
Thank you.
I think that's it. So if there's no further business, so unless there are objections, unless there are objections, we are adjourned.